For years, I was treated like a servant in my own home, brewing coffee, cleaning, cooking, and hosting parties for my daughter-in-law's guests. But this time, Chloe coldly turned her back after announcing she would be inviting 26 of her relatives to spend Christmas at my house. I just smiled and said, "Fine, I'm going on vacation. You can handle it yourselves." She snapped, "If you don't do it, then who will?" That question rang out like an outright confession. I didn't answer. I simply tightened my grip on the small notebook in my hand. Because what they didn't know was that this very moment marked the beginning of a plan. I had been preparing in silence, a plan strong enough to make Chloe's dream Christmas dinner collapse right in front of her. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I am Helena Moore, 67 years old, living in a 2-story colonial-style home in the suburbs of San Diego, California. I bought and paid off this house 30 years ago with the salary I earned together with my late husband, Richard. The day we signed the final mortgage papers, I cried tears of happiness. To me, this house was not just a place to live, it was my youth, my sweat and labor, and every piece of family memory. But sadly, after Richard passed away, the house slowly turned into a free hotel for my son and his wife. I once believed that when my son got married, our family would grow more people, more joy. But from the day Adrian married Chloe Delgado, everything changed. Chloe was a young, attractive woman, well-spoken, always knowing how to charm people in public. But to me, from the moment she stepped into this house, she treated me like a shadow, a free maid. She called me by my first name, never Mom or even Mrs. Moore out of respect. "Helena, make me a cup of coffee." "Helena, that table is dirty, wipe it down." "Helena, there will be 10 guests tonight, you know what to do." Every word was a command, never a request. For 5 years, I endured it. I told myself that if I just worked a little harder, my son would be happy. The family would stay at peace. I thought it was a sacrifice worth making for harmony at home. But the more I gave in, the more they took advantage. Chloe basked in praise from friends and relatives. Chloe throws the best parties, everything is always perfect. Meanwhile, I was the one doing the shopping, cooking, cleaning, scrubbing dozens of dishes, and my name was never mentioned once. I remember one summer evening after scrubbing a mountain of dishes, I turned around and saw Chloe stretched out on the sofa, a glass of wine in hand, laughing with her friends. One of them asked, "Chloe, how do you manage all this?" She shrugged and smiled. "I'm just good at organizing." I stood right there, drenched in sweat, but no one even looked my way. And now she had the nerve to drop this bombshell. She would be inviting all 26 of her relatives to my house for Christmas dinner. I can still picture her leaning against the kitchen door frame in a tight designer red dress, her brown curls falling loosely, her voice detached as if reading a grocery list. "Uncle Raphael is flying in from Colombia. Bianca is coming from Houston, Marco from San Francisco, and all the cousins too. It will be a perfect Christmas." "Perfect," I repeated, though I meant it differently. Something inside me snapped, like the last string finally breaking. I didn't want to pretend anymore. I looked straight into Chloe's calculating eyes and said, "It will be a perfect Christmas for you because I'll be on vacation. You can handle it all yourselves." The smile on her lips vanished instantly. For a split second, I caught a flash of fear in her eyes, but she quickly covered it up by snapping, "If you don't do it, then who will?" I didn't answer, because the truth was already in her question. Chloe assumed I, at 67, was her lifetime of free labor, and now, by stepping out of that role, her entire plan was beginning to crumble. I turned away and pulled a small notebook from the drawer. Inside, I had been recording every detail for months: strange bills, suspicious credit card charges, and printed emails I happened to find in Adrian's office. Every line in that notebook was a puzzle piece pointing toward the truth about Chloe and the massive debts she was hiding, but I wasn't ready to reveal it yet. I lifted my chin, straightened the navy blue cardigan on my shoulders, and said only, "Tomorrow I leave. However you manage the dinner, that's up to you." I walked out, leaving Chloe frozen at the kitchen door, her hand trembling around a porcelain cup. That night, I sat alone at the long dining table, the warm light shining across the polished wood grain. Outside, the rare San Diego winter breeze carried a faint chill. I remembered past Christmases, me stringing lights, baking cookies, roasting the turkey, carving the meat, laying out the table. Family photos showed everyone smiling, while I stood in the corner of the kitchen, still wearing oven mitts, sweat dripping down my face. I had been erased from my own memories. This time would be different. I had a plan. And it began with walking out of this house the next morning. All night I tossed and turned, not from worry, but from excitement. I knew that once I left, the wheel of fate would start turning. Chloe thought I was just a submissive old woman. Adrian thought I only knew how to sacrifice, but they had no idea what I had prepared. When the truth came out, their dream Christmas would turn into a nightmare they would never forget. I closed my journal and whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, Helena Moore will no longer be a shadow in her own home." The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. At 6 o'clock, the pale winter sunlight slipped through the curtains of my bedroom. I sat at the small wooden table by the window, holding a hot cup of tea quietly, looking out at the backyard. The rose bushes Richard once tended were withered now, but to me, they were still an indelible part of our history. At that moment, I felt more clearly than ever. This house, every brick and every window, was built from our labor and years of effort. It belonged to me, not a stage for my daughter-in-law to put on a show. When I came downstairs to the kitchen, Chloe was already sitting there, her face tense. She was still wearing that glamorous red dress from yesterday, but in the pale morning light, it had lost its shine. Her arms were crossed, her nails tapping impatiently on the table like she was waiting for a servant. "You really are going to leave?" she demanded, her tone sharp, but I could hear the panic beneath it. I set my cup down and sat across from her. "I'm not planning to, I'm certain. And let me remind you, this is my house. I paid for it, I've cared for it for 30 years. Whoever gets invited here, whatever gets hosted here, it's the homeowner's decision, mine." Chloe let out a brittle laugh, though her voice quivered. "Our house, Helena, don't you forget? This is Adrian's too. One day, all of it will be ours. You're just keeping it warm for now." Her words stabbed at me like an icy knife. But I didn't lose my temper. I was too used to her condescension. I tilted my head, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "It seems you forgot I'm still alive. And as long as I'm alive, this house is mine. No one else gets to decide for me." Her face drained of color. She clutched the edge of the table, her red-painted nails digging into the wood. "You're selfish. People are flying in from all over, some from as far as Colombia, and you'll abandon them? Don't you feel ashamed?" I sighed. "I didn't invite them, so I'm not ashamed. The one who should be ashamed is the person who invites guests but can't handle them." At that moment, the front door clicked open. Adrian walked in, still in a wrinkled business suit. He looked exhausted, his hair messy, his face tense. Seeing Chloe and me facing off in the kitchen, he froze. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking from his wife to me, as if trying to decide who was telling the truth. Chloe rushed over, grabbing his arm, almost crying. "Your mother says she's leaving, abandoning me with 26 of my relatives. What am I supposed to do?" Adrian frowned, turning toward me. "Mom, are you really going to walk out right now? Do you have to make this such a big deal? It's only a few days for the family to enjoy Christmas together." I stared at my son, the child I once carried, taught to read, and took to baseball games. Now he stood there, telling me I was making a big deal, simply because I refused to keep being a servant in my own home. A cold sadness filled me. "Adrian," I said slowly, "you think I'm overreacting. But tell me, have you ever seen me sit and eat a full meal during a holiday? Do you remember who cleaned until midnight after guests left? Have you ever asked if I was tired or happy? Or did you only notice everything was ready while I was invisible?" He opened his mouth but couldn't speak. "Finally," he said, trying to keep calm, "I know you've sacrificed a lot, Mom, but it's Christmas. We're a family. Don't you want us all together?" I let out a dry laugh. "A family? A family where the elder is treated like hired help is no family at all. If that's your definition of happiness, I'd rather be alone." Chloe cut in, her voice shrill. "You're just making everything harder. If you don't help, who's going to cook for 26 people? Who's going to clean? Who's going to decorate?" I stood, straightened my coat, and said, "Whoever invited them should handle it. As for me, I'm going on vacation." Both of them froze. Adrian stared at me in shock. Chloe's face flushed red with fury. "I can't believe this," Adrian muttered. "You're really going to embarrass your son in front of his wife's entire family?" I looked straight into his eyes and said firmly, "Yes, because I wasn't born to serve anyone, not even you." The kitchen fell silent. The ticking of the wall clock echoed sharp and painful. Chloe finally screamed, "Who do you think you are? Without you, this Christmas will fall apart." I turned toward the door, but before stepping out, I said, "That's right. And that's exactly what I want to see." That afternoon, as I sat alone on the porch, Adrian came to me. He stood awkwardly, like he wanted to speak but couldn't. I kept my gaze on the lawn, the golden sunlight falling across the trees. "Adrian," I said quietly, "you think I'm being unreasonable, but really, I just want to live as a person. This is my house. The rules here must be mine, not Chloe's, not anyone else's. If you want to use it, there has to be respect. Without respect, there is no place here." He stayed silent for a long time. I saw the conflict in his eyes between loyalty to his wife and the shame from hearing his mother's truth. In the end, he only sighed and walked away. I knew Adrian wasn't ready to face the truth yet, but I also knew this time I would not step back. That night, I packed a few essentials. In my small suitcase, alongside clothes, I placed the thick notebook where I had recorded everything. I slipped it into the hidden compartment. My heart felt strangely calm. Tomorrow, I would leave, not to run away, but to draw the final line. The line that says, "This is my home, and I am no longer anyone's servant." I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and listened to the wind whistling through the window. In the darkness, I smiled faintly. They thought I was just lashing out in anger, but they had no idea this was only the beginning. I never thought the kitchen, the place where I had spent most of my life, would become my strongest weapon. To Chloe, the kitchen was just where good smells came from, a stage for perfect Instagram photos. To me, it was life itself, the place that bound our family together. And now, it was where I planted the seeds of the counterattack I had been quietly preparing for months. It all started 3 months ago, on a morning like any other. I was cleaning Adrian's office, a task Chloe never bothered with. While dusting the bookshelf, I knocked over a folder, papers scattered across the floor. As I bent down to pick them up, I noticed a few unusual bank statements. At first, I intended to put them back. But then one line caught my eye. Credit card, holder, Adrian Moore divided by authorized user, Chloe Delgado. I opened it. The numbers jumped off the page like blades cutting into me. Huge charges, luxury handbags, high-end stilettos worth thousands of dollars, even first-class flights to New York just for a weekend shopping trip. All under Adrian's name, but clearly used by Chloe. My hands were shaking. My son works a steady job at a finance office. How could he possibly carry these kinds of charges, and why didn't he know? I sat down, heart pounding, realizing something even worse was going on. That night, I didn't sleep. When the house was quiet, I went back to the office, turned on the desk lamp, and carefully sifted through every folder. I found more than I expected: printed emails, short-term loan agreements, and even a consultation letter from Marco, Chloe's brother-in-law, a real estate broker. In one letter, Marco wrote plainly, "If Helena's house is sold, the revolving capital will let Adrian invest more aggressively." I went numb. The house I spent my life protecting had become revolving capital in their eyes. Chloe wanted to turn my lifetime of work into a tool to cover her shopping addiction and her husband's financial fantasies. The next morning, I pulled myself together. I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I knew I needed more than an emotional outburst. I had to protect myself and protect my naive son from the marital trap he was sliding into. I started by quietly moving all my savings to a different bank, opening an account in my name only, with no connection to Adrian. Next, I set up a meeting with an old acquaintance, Thomas Reed, the attorney who helped my husband and me with our estate paperwork. Thomas is calm, with neatly cut silver hair and glasses that always slide down his nose. I told him everything. He nodded, took meticulous notes, and said, "There's a way to protect your assets, Mrs. Moore. Don't worry, but be careful. Don't let them know you know." That advice became my compass. Outwardly, I stayed the gentle, elderly mother, still cooking and cleaning as usual. But behind my bedroom door, I became someone else, a 67-year-old woman quietly collecting every shard of truth. I began logging all of Chloe's suspicious expenses. Every time I saw a strange bill in the mailbox, I photographed it. I noted each new designer bag, writing down the date and estimated price. I even checked the trash, where Chloe tossed papers she didn't want anyone to see. I found more crumpled statements proving her credit card debt had exceeded $50,000, but I didn't stop there. I wanted to be certain. On Thomas's suggestion, I hired a private investigator. His name was Daniel, a quiet, middle-aged man who served on the police force before retiring. He specializes in personal financial verification and surveillance. We met at a small cafe by the ocean. I handed him a sealed envelope with basic details, and he nodded, promising results in a few weeks. 3 weeks later, Daniel brought me a thick file. I sat in my room, hands trembling, and opened it. What I read was even worse. Chloe's real income was only half of what she bragged to Adrian. She had taken personal loans from friends and even some of her relatives. In many emails, Chloe painted a picture that Adrian will soon inherit the house in San Diego to secure those loans. I gripped the file, feeling the blood freeze in my chest. This house where I raised my son, where Richard's ashes rest in an oak urn on the shelf, had been turned into a bargaining chip in Chloe's debt game. That night, I sat alone under the warm lamplight and wrote in my thick notebook, September 14th. Chloe used my name and the house to borrow money. Purpose: spending and hiding a shopping addiction. Adrian has no idea. Every word cut like a knife, but I kept writing because I needed clear evidence. When the pieces finally lined up, I moved to the last step, reaching out directly to Chloe's side of the family. I didn't expose her outright. I chose a smarter way. I wrote brief emails as Mrs. Moore, the concerned mother-in-law, asking for their thoughts on the couple's financial situation. In the emails, I accidentally attached a few statements. I didn't attack or accuse. I simply asked, "What should I do to help them?" The responses came faster than I expected. Rafael Ortiz, the wealthy uncle from Colombia, replied short and cold, "We need to talk in person." Bianca, Chloe's sister who works in finance, sent a long message expressing disappointment that the real numbers were so different from what Chloe had told them. Marco, the real estate broker, went silent after receiving the forwarded email where he advised selling my house. I read every response with a tight chest, but I also saw a spark of hope. They were beginning to doubt Chloe herself, no longer seeing her as the perfect wife. and I knew this Christmas would be when everything blew open. From that moment, my kitchen was no longer the place where I cooked every meal to please my daughter-in-law. It became a battleground. I didn't need to scream or argue. All I had to do was step out of the kitchen and out of the hired help role, and Chloe's fake wall would come crashing down. I sat in the dark that night, listening to the clock tick, knowing the seed of my counterattack had been planted. And once planted, no one could stop it from sprouting. On the morning of December 23rd, I woke earlier than usual. San Diego was hazy, a rare winter chill threading through the door frame. I pulled back the curtains and watched the bare trees sway in the weak light. It was a quiet morning, but inside me was a strange joy. Today was the day I left this house not to run away, but to prove I would no longer be imprisoned in the role of servant to my own family. I went downstairs, opened the refrigerator, and saw empty shelves. I had cleared it out the night before. No turkey in the freezer, no vegetables, no milk, not even butter for toast. Just a few cans of soda and an old block of cheese. In doing so, I left a bare stage with no props for Chloe and Adrian to manage their perfect Christmas. I took a blank sheet of paper, wrote a few careful lines, and set it in the center of the dining table. Wishing you a beautiful Christmas. The house and the party are in your hands. Sincerely, Helena. No scolding, no long explanations. Just a few words, but I knew it would be a time bomb in Chloe's hands. Then I walked through the house, locking what needed to be locked. My fine china, the set I've treasured since marrying Richard, was safely stored in a cabinet with its own key. The Christmas decorations I usually hang each year, from old glass ornaments to the wreath on the front door, were wrapped and packed in the attic. I left nothing they could use for show. One last step. I canceled the cleaning service I had paid for steadily over the years. This time, they would learn what a crowded house felt like without an invisible hand behind it. By 8 a.m., I rolled my suitcase down the steps. Inside were a few outfits, my journal, and the thick file Daniel had given me. I also tucked in a big hardcover book I'd meant to read for ages but never had the chance. This Christmas, for the first time in years, would be for me. A taxi pulled up at the curb. The driver, a middle-aged Mexican-American man, helped lift my suitcase into the trunk. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the house one last time. The little wooden sign by the door still read, "The Moore Family." But for the first time, I saw clearly. I would no longer let that name be used as a springboard for Chloe's lies. I arrived at a beachfront resort a little over an hour's drive from home. It wasn't overly fancy, but it was quiet, set right on white sand with tall palm trees whispering in the wind. I booked an ocean view room for 5 nights with breakfast included. The front desk greeted me with a kind smile, so different from the indifference I'd grown used to from my own daughter-in-law. When I entered the room, I opened the balcony door and let the sea breeze roll in. The sound of waves was like a long lullaby. I took a deep breath, feeling a heavy stone lift off my shoulders. After years of living like a shadow in my own house, I was finally free. My phone buzzed nonstop. Adrian called, then Chloe. Then came a string of texts. I slid the phone to silent and skimmed a few lines. "Mom, why did you leave without telling me? Mrs. Moore, don't be childish. People are about to arrive. Are you trying to make us look bad? Mom, at least tell us where the china is." I smiled. They were so used to me fixing every mess behind the scenes that the moment I stepped away, their world tilted. I brewed a cup of coffee in the room and sat on the balcony, watching the sun glitter on the water. For the first time in years, I enjoyed coffee without rushing, without a to-do list. A calm settled over me. That afternoon, I ordered a car to loop past my neighborhood just to watch from a distance. As we rolled slowly down my street, I saw an SUV in front of the house, stuffed with shopping bags, definitely Chloe's. She must have been racing around once she discovered the empty fridge. I also caught a glimpse of Adrian hauling cases of soda from a store. I didn't feel glee, only confirmation that my plan was working as intended. The phone rang again, This time, I picked up. Adrian's voice was breathless. "Mom, I know you're upset, but this isn't the time. 26 people are about to arrive. Chloe doesn't know what to do. Could you at least come back to help us through this? After that, go anywhere you want. I won't stop you." I took a sip of coffee and answered evenly, "Adrian, you're an adult. You and your wife invited them, so you two are responsible. I'm not doing it for you anymore. That's my decision." "But Mom, they're all her relatives." "I'm going to lose face," I cut in. "Losing face is the price you pay for letting someone build plans on your mother's labor. You need to learn to stand up and take responsibility." I hung up before he could plead further. The move had been made. I couldn't pull back now. That night, I sat in the hotel room, listening to the waves. I opened Daniel's file and turned page after page. The evidence was all there: debts, lies, even Chloe using my name to borrow money. I could feel the day coming when her act would fall apart, but I wasn't in a rush. Christmas would be the stage. All I had to do was step aside and let the truth reveal itself. The next morning, I walked barefoot along the beach, my feet sinking into the cold sand. The wind tossed my hair, carrying the salty air. I felt lighter than I had in years. I thought of Richard if he were alive. He would nod in approval. He always said, "Helena, don't let anyone diminish your work." When I got back to the room, I checked my phone. More than 10 missed calls and long messages from Chloe. "Mrs. Moore, you can't do this to me. People are arriving tonight. I need you. If you don't come back, don't blame me for telling the truth." I smiled. The truth she meant to threaten me with was the very trap I had prepared. She had no idea I already held all the evidence, ready to share at the right time. I set the phone down and poured myself a glass of red wine from the minibar. The wine shimmered under the warm light like an ellipsis at the end of an old chapter, and the start of a new one in my life. Tonight, while Chloe scrambled in an empty kitchen and her relatives arrived one after another, I wouldn't be there. But my absence would be louder than any presence. It would be a wake-up call, an ending to the years I was taken for granted, and I knew that with a little patience, this entire Christmas dinner would become the main curtain for the truth to be revealed. On the morning of December 24th, I opened my eyes as pale golden sunlight slipped through the thin white curtains of my resort room. The ocean kept murmuring in steady waves, like a chorus that never ends. I sat up, stretched my legs, still a little sore from walking too long along the beach yesterday. A strange feeling washed over me, peaceful yet excited, as if I were sitting at the edge of a grand play where, from now on, I would only be the audience. The phone on the nightstand lit up. A few texts from Adrian had come in near midnight. "Mom, I'm sorry for upsetting you, but please reconsider Christmas without. You won't mean anything. Chloe is panicking. I don't know how to handle this. Mom, I'll come get you if you change your mind." I read them slowly, then set the phone down. The same familiar tone, partly shifting blame, partly asking me to rescue them, but I'm not the compliant Helena anymore. I took a deep breath and looked at the blue ocean stretching out beyond the balcony. Today doesn't belong to them. It belongs to me. After the breakfast of fried eggs and hot coffee, I stepped out onto the veranda to read the news. Suddenly the phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. "Is this Mrs. Helena Moore? I'm Elias, Chloe's cousin. My family and I arrived in San Diego earlier than planned. We were going to stop by the house to help Chloe get ready, but something feels off. Could you spare a few minutes to talk?" I went quiet. So they were here earlier than expected. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. "Hello, Mr. Elias. I'm afraid I'm not at home right now. I'm on vacation, but I'm willing to hear you out." On the other end, his voice was firm. "Chloe says you left without notice and the house is empty. No food, no decorations, nothing. Is that true?" I took a sip of water and answered carefully, it's true. I left because I refused to be treated like hired help in my own home. This year, if they invited 26 people, then they can handle it themselves. I didn't sign a contract to be anyone's cook or maid. There was a pause, then Elias cleared his throat. Do you know what Chloe told us? That you always happily host, that you take pride in cooking for the whole extended family, that you insist on organizing Christmas every year. I gave a dry laugh. A pretty story, but not true. I did it because I thought keeping the peace would help my son. Joy was never part of it. I heard some noise in the background, then Elias lowered his voice. I'm starting to understand. Chloe never told us any of this. But Mrs. Moore, I have to ask. The documents you sent to Griselda about Chloe's debts, are they all real? I narrowed my eyes and leaned back in the chair. So they had received the files I accidentally forwarded. I answered firmly, completely real. I have copies of every bill and every loan. She used Adrian's name and even tried to gloss it over by leveraging my house as collateral. A stir rose on the other end, as if Elias were sharing this immediately with others in the room. Then his voice returned, colder. Thank you. I think we're going to have a very frank conversation with my niece. You don't need to worry. We're here to get to the truth, not to cover it up. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Good. Because I believe it's time for Chloe to face the truth. We ended the call. My heart was still pounding, but not from fear. It felt like relief, as if the burden had finally been shared. I wasn't alone anymore. Around 10 a.m., a new string of texts arrived from Adrian, urgent, a bit shaky. Mom, they're here. Do you know what Uncle Elias asked me? What did you send, Griselda? They're looking at me like I'm an accomplice. Mom, please come back and explain. I don't want the whole family misunderstanding. I read without replying. What Adrian called a misunderstanding was the truth he wasn't ready to face. Deep down, I still love my son, but I can't keep enabling his blindness. At lunchtime, I went down to the oceanfront restaurant for something light. Holding a glass of red wine, I pictured the scene back home, Chloe scrambling around the kitchen, her usually icy face now likely pale, her relatives, some flown in from far away, whispering and buzzing, Elias grilling her with a stern voice, Griselda laying out the papers, Adrian stuck between his wife and the truth. In my mind, I saw it clearly, and I felt an odd calm. I no longer had to stand at the sink until midnight, no longer had to fake a smile when everyone praised Chloe for being so capable. I was here, watching the blue waves, sipping wine. For the first time, Christmas felt like it was truly mine. That afternoon, another call came, this time from Griselda. I remembered her, Chloe's cousin, neat, sharp, intelligent. Mrs. Moore, I'm sorry to bother you, but we need to verify a few details. Chloe says you made it up, but I'm holding the credit card statements. Please confirm. I answered immediately, steady. Nothing is fabricated. I found them by chance in Adrian's file cabinet, and if needed, I can provide originals. Griselda exhaled. I believe you. Chloe, she's in denial, but the facts are too clear. I just want you to know that our side of the family respects you, and we're deeply disappointed in how Chloe has treated you. Her words made my eyes sting. For years I'd endured contempt, and now at least some outsiders finally saw me for who I am. That evening, while rooms around the resort glowed with Christmas lights, I sat on the balcony with a thick shawl, listening to the surf and gazing at the silver moon. My phone buzzed non-stop, but I didn't pick up. I pictured the chaos at my house as all 26 guests realized they'd been invited to a home with no food, no decorations, and no host. And most importantly, they would learn that Chloe had been living behind a mask, propped up by debt and deceit. I took a sip of wine, tasting the bittersweet mix on my tongue. A new chapter of my life had just cracked open, one where I was no longer the unpaid help, but a woman who knows how to protect herself and set boundaries. I whispered to myself, tomorrow, when the sun rises, nothing will be the same. On the morning of December 25th, I had just stepped into the hotel hallway when the front desk clerk called out, "Mrs. Moore, there's an urgent call for you." From Mr. Raphael, Chloe's cousin. I paused. Raphael, the calm, successful man who'd quietly been the financial backbone of Chloe's family. If he was reaching out, things had definitely spun out of control. I nodded, walked to the counter, picked up the receiver with slightly trembling hands, but kept my voice even. "This is Helena." On the other end, Raphael's voice came low and heavy. "Mrs. Moore, thank you for taking this call. We're at your house right now. There are too many inconsistencies. Chloe says one thing, but the documents Griselda and Bianca just showed me paint a different picture. I need to hear it directly from you." I drew a deep breath, steadying myself. This was the moment to lay the cards on the table. "All right, Raphael, I'll be clear. For the past 5 years, every party, every holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, even last-minute gatherings were all prepared by me from A to Z. I bought the groceries, cooked, cleaned, decorated. Chloe only appeared when the guests arrived wearing a glamorous dress, a bright smile, and accepting the compliments. My name was never mentioned. All the credit went to her. Silence. Then Raphael's voice dropped. "So it's true. All the praise we gave Chloe actually belonged to you." I gave a small, bitter smile, not triumphant, just the weary grin of someone who has kept quiet too long. "No, Raphael, I don't need praise. I need respect." And that never existed. Papers rustled, then he asked, "I have bank statements and the authorized card bills here. Can you confirm these charges?" I nodded, though he couldn't see. "Yes, I found them in Adrian's financial files." The authorized credit card was opened under my late husband's name and used by Chloe without Adrian's knowledge. There are also loans using my house as collateral. I can't stay silent any longer. The line went dense, and still I could hear the lobby clock ticking where I stood. After a long moment, Raphael spoke again, like his words were ground out through clenched teeth. "You also have Marco's sell your mother's house advisory letter, don't you?" I closed my eyes. That letter flashed in my mind. Marco, one of Chloe's cousins, wrote a handwritten note urging Adrian to convince your mother to sell so he could reinvest. Chloe had tucked it into a file. If I hadn't stumbled on it, I might never have known. "Yes, Raphael, I have a copy. I kept it as evidence, not for revenge, but to protect myself. Sell the house I spent 30 years building with sweat and sacrifice?" Did they really think it would be that easy? On the other end, Raphael let out a heavy sigh. I pictured him staring hard at Chloe, eyes seasoned and cold. Then Bianca's voice came through, clear and precise. "Mrs. Moore, I just reviewed a few documents. It looks like Chloe may have used Adrian's name to open an additional account. The circular debts all trace back there. Were you aware of that?" Chills ran up my back. I had suspected it, but never confirmed it, so Bianca had found it. I spoke each word distinctly. "No, I didn't know about that account. But I'm not surprised. Adrian trusts his wife completely, and that blind trust kept him from verifying anything. All I know is this: if Chloe could impersonate my son to shuffle money, then every boundary has already been crossed." Noise spilled through the line. People in the room must have stood up, confronting Chloe. I caught her voice arguing, choking up, mixed with the scrape of chairs. Raphael cut through the chaos, his voice like steel. "Helena, thank you for your honesty. I have just one more question. Why did you choose to leave and let us face this truth right at Christmas? Do you know how shocking this has been for everyone?" I closed my eyes and breathed deeply to keep my tone calm. I didn't leave for revenge, Raphael. I left to set a boundary. For 5 years, I let myself be treated like a shadow, my work taken, my dignity dismissed. I needed them and all of you to know I won't accept that anymore. Respect isn't bestowed, it has to be reclaimed. This wasn't impulsive, it was a carefully considered decision, and this Christmas, instead of bending over a stove, I'm here, speaking with you, no longer bowing my head. A long silence followed. I could imagine Raphael's eyes sweeping the staying. Crowded room, Chloe likely shrinking back, Adrian stunned. Finally, Raphael spoke, every word landing like a hammer. There will be no more financial support without full transparency. We've been far too lenient with Chloe. As of today, it ends. My heart thudded hard. That was exactly the sentence I'd been waiting to hear. Bianca added, firm and clear, and we'll be requesting a thorough investigation into the account opened under Adrian's name. This is no longer just a family matter, it may be a legal one. On the other end of the line, the room erupted. Chloe screamed in protest, and Adrian panicked, trying to smooth things over. But Raphael and Bianca had made themselves clear. There was no way back for Chloe. I smiled, light as if I'd just set down a burden I'd carried for years. Thank you, Mr. Raphael. Thank you, Bianca. I know this isn't easy to hear, but I believe the truth will ultimately free everyone, and I hope Adrian wakes up. Raphael sighed. Mrs. Helena, I'm sorry for trusting the wrong person all this time, but rest assured, this Christmas, instead of a fake, lavish party, we're going to have the conversation we need. A reckoning our family can't avoid anymore. That sentence felt like a period at the end of 5 years of endurance. I answered softly, good. That's exactly the Christmas I've been waiting for. We said a brief goodbye. I set the receiver down. My heart was racing, but I felt an indescribable lightness. I went back to my room, picked up the phone, and called the resort spa. Hello, I'd like to book a full-body relaxation massage for 2 hours, the earliest available, please. The spa receptionist's voice was warm. We have an opening in 1 hour, Mrs. Moore. I nodded and smiled. Perfect. 1 hour later, I was lying on the spa table, the scent of lavender oil filling the room. The therapist's skilled hands slowly dissolved knots that had built up over the years. I closed my eyes and let go. In my mind, Raphael's stern face, Bianca's firmness, Chloe's panic, and Adrian's confusion flickered by. But my shoulders, my back, my mind, everything felt lighter, bit by bit. For the first time in years, I could see it clearly. The weight I'd been carrying no longer belonged to me. I had set it down where it needed to be set. I exhaled and whispered to myself, this Christmas, I finally get to be me. On the afternoon of December 25th, after the call with Raphael and Bianca, I sat on the resort balcony. Listening to the waves lapping at the shore, I felt both relieved and expectant. I knew that tonight, Chloe's so-called perfect Christmas party would turn into a clumsy performance. And then the truth would speak for itself without me stepping in. I pictured the scene. 26 relatives from out of town, most dressed to the nines, expecting a lavish feast. They would step into my spacious home, and instead of twinkling lights and the smell of roasted turkey, they would find a cold living room and an empty dining table. Close to 6 p.m., my phone buzzed. I hesitated, then answered. It wasn't Adrian or Chloe. A confident woman's voice came through. Mrs. Helena, this is Miriam, Chloe's cousin on her mother's side. I just arrived with the family. I think you should know. It's absolute chaos here. I sat up straighter. Tell me everything. Miriam didn't mince words. There's no dinner, no turkey, no mashed potatoes, no dessert. The fridge is empty. Chloe tried to claim she was having food delivered, but everyone's getting irritated. Finally, Adrian scrambled and ordered pizza, and not 2 or 3. They ordered 26 individual pizzas, 1 for each person. I laughed out loud, a laugh both bitter and relieved. For years, I poured my heart into cooking every dish so the whole family could praise Chloe's skill. Now, the facade had collapsed to the sound of cheap pizza boxes being opened. "Thank you, Miriam," I said calmly. "Maybe that's the real Christmas dinner Chloe needs." That evening, as I sat in a beachfront restaurant sipping red wine, Miriam sent another message. Photos of my living room covered in pizza boxes. Red and white boxes stacked high, heat rising with the smell of cheese and grease. No elegant presentation, just paper plates and soda cans. Looking at the picture, I realized sometimes the truth doesn't need accusations, just a plain image to expose everything. 26 pizzas were the most honest mirror of a years-long pretense. According to what Miriam told me later, that meal played out like a quiet trial. When the boxes were spread across the table, Raphael sat still, not touching a slice. He watched Chloe and said slowly, "This is what you call a Christmas you organized?" Chloe stammered, her voice shaking. I didn't expect my mother-in-law to leave and abandon everything. I did my best to make it work." Raphael folded his arms, expression blank. "But for 5 years, you told us you prepared everything. Turns out it was a lie. And the real result of your capability today is 26 boxes of pizza." The room fell silent. An older woman shook her head and whispered, "Shameful," Bianca added, voice cool. "Chloe, if you want anyone to believe you, you need transparency. But the financial documents and this dinner prove the opposite. You didn't just lie to the family, you lied to yourself." Adrian sat quietly, head down. He didn't speak, didn't eat, just touched a soda can and set it back down. I knew my son was torn between blind love for his wife and the truth right in front of him. Miriam said a few relatives even let out bitter laughs. A young man joked, sharp as a blade, "Guess this pizza is the secret family recipe Chloe's been bragging about." Laughter broke out, not joyful, but angry and mocking. Chloe flushed red, eyes brimming, but no one wanted to hear excuses anymore. Meanwhile, I was at the resort, enjoying dinner, grilled salmon and vegetables. I cut small bites and chewed slowly, tasting each flavor. The fish melted softly, the vegetables were crisp. I felt like I was reliving the early years with Richard, when we were poor but cooked simple, warm meals for each other. I thought, the value of a dinner isn't in appearances or the guest count, it's in sincerity. And tonight, buried under 26 boxes of pizza, Chloe's pretense was swallowed whole. Around 9 p.m., Miriam called again, her voice lower. "Mrs. Helena, the party's officially over. Half the guests left early. The rest stayed only to talk, but there's no holiday spirit left." Raphael told Chloe flat out, "This Christmas isn't a reunion. It's a lesson." My heart hurt and lifted at the same time, hurt because my son was being dragged down with her, lifted because the truth was no longer hidden behind lies. Miriam hesitated, then added, "Maybe you don't need to come back. Your absence is what finally made us see. Without you at Christmas, we realized who's actually kept this family standing all these years." My eyes burned. I answered softly, "Thank you. I only hope this is enough to wake everyone up." That night, I turned off my phone and didn't read any more messages from Adrian or Chloe. In a soft robe, I sat on the hotel balcony and looked out over the dark sea. The waves kept their rhythm, as if whispering to me, "At last, Helena, you've drawn your boundary." I smiled faintly, raised my glass, and murmured, "This Christmas, I'm not in the kitchen. I'm here, and I'm free." On the morning of December 26th, with mist still hanging over the ocean and the palms swaying lightly in the cold breeze, I sat alone in the breakfast room. My coffee steamed beside me, the aroma mingling with the smell of toast. I quietly watched young couples chatter at the next table and remembered when Richard and I were the same, sharing everything, no secrets, no deceit. My phone buzzed. I hesitated, then answered. It was Raphael. His voice was hoarse, clearly worn down by a long, tense night. "Helena, you need to hear this. That so-called inheritance Chloe kept telling our family about, it was all made up." I frowned and set the coffee down. "Explain." Raphael sighed and went on. "Chloe told the relatives multiple times that you intended to leave the entire house and your assets to Adrian, and that you were just waiting for the right moment to announce it. She even hinted that my mother-in-law wants peace of mind before she passes, as if you were near the end. That promise made it easier for her to borrow money, gather sympathy, and get temporary financial help." I clenched my hands, anger rising to my throat. So all these years, Chloe hadn't just exploited my labor, she'd fabricated an inheritance to legitimize her greed. "That's not true," I said flatly, my voice hardening. "I've never written a will like that. This house is mine, and if one day I do write a will, it won't be to turn me into an excuse for brazen lies." Raphael was silent for a few seconds. Then he said a line that landed like a stone. "The well's been capped. Chloe has no water left to draw." I understood immediately. The well was the fake inheritance story Chloe built to siphon trust and money. Now that the truth was out, there was nothing left to exploit. By noon, Miriam called again, breathless, like she'd just witnessed chaos. "Mrs. Helena, we sat down this morning to discuss solutions." But Chloe burst into tears, saying, "The inheritance has been revoked by my mother-in-law, that you're changing your will to strip Adrian of everything. She said without that house, they'll be out on the street." I gave a short, dry laugh, the kind Miriam could probably hear. "Miriam, the truth is, I never wrote a will giving them everything. There's nothing to revoke because it never existed. I think Chloe's trying to salvage this, turning her lie into a tragedy to win pity." Miriam sighed. "We suspected as much, and once Raphael brought it up, everyone understood. Chloe just sat there crying, saying you're cruel. But Mrs. Helena, for the first time, no one believes her. That afternoon I walked the beach. The cold wind brushed my cheeks. The sand sank under my bare feet. I thought about the phrase, 'the well's been capped.' In my mind, Chloe appeared like a parched person who thought she could draw forever from a bottomless well. But that well never existed. It was a lie she built using my name as a shield. My chest ached and eased at once. Ached for my son Adrian, who had been led by the nose all these years. Eased because the curtain had finally been ripped open. No more false water to pour into a glass. That evening Miriam sent me a voice recording. I turned the volume low and heard Chloe sobbing, "Adrian, you have to tell them. This house is ours." "Your mother promised," she said. "Have you forgotten?" Adrian's voice was tired, rough. "I've never heard Mom say that. Chloe, stop. We can't keep leaning on this." I burst into tears. It was just a short recording, but it was the first time I'd heard my son admit the truth. For years he stayed silent or rushed to defend his wife. Now, from his own mouth, there was no promise, no will. That night, I didn't go to sleep right away. I sat by the resort window, watching moonlight spill across the sea. I opened my journal and wrote it all down. Chloe fabricated an inheritance to gain people's trust. The family now understands the truth and no longer sides with her. Adrian has finally faced reality. I added one more line. The well is capped, but I still have a real spring inside me. It's freedom. The next day, Raphael called again. His voice was firm. "Helena, I want you to have peace of mind. None of us believes the inheritance story anymore. If you need us to, we're willing to testify in court that Chloe made it up. But I think, after last night, everyone already understands." I nodded, though he couldn't see it. "Thank you, Raphael. I don't want lawsuits or a big scene, but I need the truth to be respected. That's all." Raphael replied softly, "We owe you that fairness." I set the phone down and leaned back in the chair. Outside, the waves kept breaking. I felt another layer lift off my shoulders, as if the thick dust covering my life had been washed away, bit by bit. In my memory, Chloe's image still appeared. The proud posture when she stepped out to take the praise, the fake smile when she showed off to relatives, the cold eyes when she ordered me to cook. Now all that was left was a small, confused silhouette clinging to a lie no one believed anymore, and I, for the first time in years, was no longer trapped in the inheritance snare. I could breathe fully, freely, like the waves outside, crashing onto the shore, then pulling back, leaving wide open space behind. On December 27th, I checked out of the resort. That short break felt like a deep breath after years of being squeezed. My body felt lighter, my mind clear. I wheeled my suitcase to the lobby and gave the front desk a genuine smile. They didn't know my story, but in their eyes I felt courtesy and respect, things I hadn't felt in my own house for a long time. The taxi took me back to my familiar street. Through the window, houses still wore wreaths, and Christmas lights twinkled in the thin morning mist. The holiday air lingered, but inside me, an old Christmas had died to make room for a new beginning. As the car turned onto my block, I saw trash bins piled haphazardly at the curb. On top, red and white pizza boxes were stacked high, lids flung open, cheese congealed. A greasy smell hung, faintly in the air. The sight was living proof of Chloe's humiliating failure. I paid the driver and pulled my suitcase through the gate. The big wooden door swung open, and for the first time in years, I stepped into my house not as a cleaning lady, but as the owner. The living room was still messy. A few chairs were out of place, the dining table smudged with grease. No one was home, only weak light spilled in through the windows. I walked slowly, reclaiming each step as if it were a piece of ground I'd lost. I set the suitcase in the hallway and didn't rush to clean. In the past, the first thing I'd do after any party was plunge into the kitchen, scrubbing a mountain of dishes, scouring pots, vacuuming. But today, I left everything as it was. The mess was no longer my responsibility. It was a trace, a reminder of lies that had been exposed. I sat on the sofa, back straight, eyes lifted to the ceiling. In that moment, I realized I wasn't huddling in a corner anymore. I sat like the owner, exactly who I was meant to be. About an hour later, the door opened. Adrian walked in. My son looked worn out, wrinkled shirt, dark circles. He froze when he saw me sitting there, then said softly, "Mom." I just looked at him, saying nothing. Adrian bowed his head like a child caught cheating. "Mom, I'm sorry." His voice shook. "I know I was wrong. I let you suffer all this time. But I truly didn't know Chloe made up the inheritance. I thought." I cut in, my voice low but steady. "Adrian, the problem isn't only Chloe. It's you. You let someone else make decisions for you, speak over your voice in this family. And you let your mother become a shadow in her own home." Adrian clenched his hands. His shoulders trembled. In his eyes I saw not just confusion but real remorse. He nodded slowly. "You're right, I let it go too far." I sighed. "But recognizing it is still in time, Adrian. You have to learn to stand up straight and take responsibility for your family. I can't live your life for you." Right then, the door swung open again. Chloe came in. Her face was haggard, makeup smeared, eyes swollen from crying. Seeing me there, she stopped short, as if she couldn't believe it. You're back?" she said, her voice a mix of anger and fear. I looked straight at her. "Yes, I'm back. This is my house, Chloe, and I didn't return to keep serving. I came back to put everything in its rightful place." She burst into tears, lunging forward, voice rising. "You ruined me. You made the whole family turn on me. You made them think I'm a liar, a greedy person. You have no idea how hard I tried." I stood, no longer averting my eyes. "No, Chloe, you ruined yourself." I didn't have to say a word, just step away and the truth surfaced. Your fake inheritance collapsed, just like the 26 pizza boxes piled in this living room. And now you have nothing left to cling to. Chloe choked, then turned to Adrian for shelter. But my son only stood still and shook his head. I stepped closer, my voice low but clear. I'm not kicking anyone out, but from now on, this house is not a place where anyone gets to treat me like hired help. If you want to be here, you show respect. If you can't, that door is open for you to leave. The air in the room turned heavy. Chloe gripped her purse so tightly her lip bled. Adrian stared at the floor but didn't object. I knew in that moment the power in this house had shifted. No more Chloe's boasting and quiet manipulation, only me, Helena Moore, the true owner. That night I didn't feel alone. I went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of hot tea, and set it on the dining table. I didn't need to prepare a feast or please anyone. It was just me, a cup of tea, and quiet. With the first sip, I realized that for the first time in years, I'd returned to my own home with my head held high. I wrote a short line in my discreet forewingly journal. Today I came back. Not as a servant, not as the silent one. I returned in control. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, a soft rustle. I felt as if Richard were whispering in my ear, "Helena, you finally did it." The living room looked different that morning. No chaotic energy, no shouting, just a calm, solemn space. On the oak table, a thick stack of documents lay neatly arranged. I sat in the main chair, back straight, eyes level. Chloe and Adrian sat across from me, faces tense. The other relatives kept a heavy silence. And beside me was Thomas, the attorney who had stood by me these past months. Thomas adjusted his glasses, opened the file, and spoke decisively. "Mrs. Moore has officially transferred this home into the Moore Trust. From now on, this house cannot be sold, mortgaged, or pledged in any form without direct written consent from Mrs. Helena." I saw Chloe flinch. Her shoulders shook. She glanced desperately at Adrian, but Thomas continued. "Even in the event of Mrs. Helena's passing," he said, "this trust preserves the right against forced sale. That means this house remains a family legacy. No one can use it for bartering, borrowing, or paying off debts. This is a legal stronghold designed to protect the lifetime of labor she invested." I drew a deep breath and felt light. After so many years of being dismissed, each word sounded like a solid brick building a wall around me. Thomas paused, looked straight at Chloe, and said, "The new residency clause is also in effect. Chloe, from today you no longer have the right to come and go as you please. Any visit must be approved in advance by Mrs. Helena. This house is a private home, not a hotel or a hall open to anyone who feels like walking in." Chloe's face flushed, then turned ashen. She opened her mouth to retort, but Thomas calmly raised a hand. "I'm not finished. During our review, we found signs of credit abuse and impersonation. Specifically, certain secondary accounts were opened under Adrian's name without clear consent. If necessary, we will report this to the authorities." The room fell silent. Adrian leaned forward. "What are you talking about?" "I never." Thomas stayed even. "We have concrete evidence. And this is the moment for transparency. If you maintain you didn't know, the responsibility to explain falls on whoever used your name. We have enough statements to prove it." I watched Adrian slowly turn to his wife. Chloe avoided his eyes, hands clasped and shaking. Raphael, who had been quiet, finally spoke, his voice steady, threaded with disappointment. "I once promised to put money into Adrian's startup. After what I've seen, I'm withdrawing every financial commitment. Adrian, you need to stand on your own 2 feet. If you keep letting your mother carry the kitchen work, the cleaning, and even the family's public image, every venture will fail. Your dependence on your mother's invisible labor ends here." His words hit the table like a hammer. Adrian bowed his head, his face drained. My heart pinched for my son, but I knew it was the truth he needed. Marco, the one who'd suggested selling the house to free up capital, fidgeted with his tie and said, "Helena, I owe you an apology. When I suggested selling the house, I wasn't thinking. I looked at it purely as a business asset and forgot it's a home, the soul of a lifetime. I truly regret it." I nodded, without reproach. At least Marco had the courage to own his mistake. Bianca, Chloe's cousin, looked at me, voice calm. "What worries me most now isn't the house, it's Chloe's debt. If we don't resolve it, it'll stain the family's reputation. I propose a clear repayment plan so everyone can see the responsibility." Chloe shot to her feet. "I can't handle all of it by myself." I laid my hand on the table, stopping her. "Chloe, for years I carried responsibilities that should have been yours, from cooking and cleaning to covering utilities, but your debt, you will pay it. The family can help outline a method, but no one is obligated to shoulder your consequences." I stood, walked slowly around the table, and stopped where everyone could see me. My voice rang out, steady and unshaken. "Everyone, we've heard enough statements, enough truths, but I want to end with the most important point. Before we talk about money, projects, investments, or repayment, we need one thing: respect. Without respect, every dollar is meaningless. I've cooked more meals than I can count, set more tables, scrubbed more stains without a single word of thanks. I've heard enough contempt and been treated like hired help in my own home. As of today, that ends." I paused, looked Adrian straight in the eye, then at Chloe, and finally swept my gaze across the room. Respect first, then money. That's the only rule I'm setting for everyone from now on. In that moment, the room went dead quiet. I saw Chloe's face go pale, her lips trembling. Adrian stared at the floor, his hands clenched. The other relatives, Marco, Raphael, and Bianca, nodded, their eyes seeming to agree with me. I knew this battle wasn't completely over, but the key move had been made. My house had become a legal fortress, no longer a place people could walk in and out of, manipulate, or scheme over. And above all, I'd re-established what they'd stomped on for years. I am the owner, not the help. I went back to my chair, sat down, lifted the cup of tea that had gone cold, and took a long breath. My shoulders felt lighter, my heart unbound. From here on, everything would be different. I sat up straight, fingers interlaced on the wooden table. The room was wide, but the air was so dense that even a strong breath would draw attention. Everyone stayed silent, as if waiting for the final strike after the legal blows that had just landed. I turned to my son, keeping my voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Adrian," I said slowly, each word like a pin puncturing the silence. "Do you choose the truth, or do you choose to keep excusing the lies?" The question made Adrian's head dip. It had been a long time since I'd seen him truly unsettled. He clenched his hands until the knuckles whitened, avoiding my eyes, then suddenly exhaled like a man realizing the mountain of his mistakes. "Mom," Adrian's voice shook, rough. "I've been blind. I thought staying quiet kept the peace, that it protected my wife. But because of that, I let you become a shadow in the very home you built." The words cut cold, but there was a late warmth in them. My eyes blurred not out of triumph, but out of grief for the 5 years lost. But I knew an apology wasn't enough. My son needed concrete action to make up for the years I'd been dismissed. I leaned forward, held his gaze, and spoke firmly. "If you're truly sorry, do 3 things for me. First, you and Chloe will set up a clear, independent budget, no more relying on my money or loans based on the family's name. Second, you will repay every dollar borrowed off that inheritance rumor, every single cent. Third, you and Chloe will write apology letters to every person affected by those promises and schemes. Only when you've done those 3 things will I believe you've chosen the truth." The air was so still I could hear the wall clock tick. Adrian looked up, eyes red, then nodded hard. I agree. Mom, I'll do it. I swear. I closed my eyes briefly and drew a deep breath. At least he finally chose the truth over a fantasy. Chloe sat beside him, her small shoulders shaking, tears rolling down her face. She gripped her husband's sleeve and choked out, "Please, Mrs. Moore, please give me a chance." "I know I was wrong, but I don't want to be cast out. I'll fix it. I really will." I turned to her. Over the years I'd seen enough staged tears and polished performances from Chloe, but this time the bloodshot eyes, the twisted face, and the scraped raw voice felt like she'd finally been cornered. Even so, my heart didn't soften. "A single tear can't wash away an ocean of lies." I answered evenly, not loud, but enough to crush any wishful thinking. "Chloe, chances don't start with promises or tears. Chances start with honesty and work. If you truly want to fix this, prove it with sweat and your own 2 hands. Don't expect anyone else to carry your load anymore." Chloe sobbed hard, face buried in her palms. I looked at her without anger now, only with the cool resolve of someone who'd decided on her last boundary. Raphael, who had been silent, suddenly stood. Tall, steady voice, eyes drilling into both Adrian and Chloe. "My family isn't funding a fantasy anymore. I thought backing Adrian was helping a young person with drive. Now I see if the foundation is lies, every project is a sandcastle. Not a single dollar from us will go into these irresponsible dreams." His words fell like a verdict. Chloe's head snapped up, and she cried out in desperation, "Raphael! Please, at least give us more time. Give me a chance to explain." But Raphael shook his head and turned away. "Time and chances weren't the problem, Chloe. The problem was honesty. And today, we've heard more than enough." The room went absolutely silent. No one spoke. Only the sound of rain starting on the porch, soft, steady taps beat time to the tension in the air. I took a commitment form Thomas had prepared from my pocket. Setting the pen on the table, I slid the paper toward Adrian and Chloe. "This is the moment to turn promises into action," I said, steady. Adrian's hand trembled as he picked up the pen. I watched his fingers shake, then he set the tip down and signed with one firm stroke. The scratch of the pen on paper cut through the heavy air. Chloe hesitated. She held the pen, eyes darting as if searching for an exit, but no one looked at her with sympathy anymore. Only my gaze, calm, unyielding. Finally, with a choked sob, she signed. The pen touched the paper, leaving a shaky trail of ink, and then the room was quieter than ever. I lifted the page and looked at the 2 fresh signatures, the ink still wet. The space seemed to compress around us. Then I set the paper down and exhaled. "That's that," I said, low but final. "From today on, everything changes. No more living off promises, off tears, or off someone else's name. Whoever made the mess will carry it. I am not the shadow in this house anymore." No one answered. Only the echo of those signatures lingered in my mind, like a drum starting a new chapter. That night, when the house was quiet again, I sat alone in the study with the signed commitment sheet in front of me. Outside, the rain kept falling, cold wind slipping through the cracks. But inside I felt warmer than I had in years, because finally my son faced the truth. And Chloe, however bitter, had no room left to deny it. That living room felt like a courtroom that morning, where justice was delivered with signatures and acknowledgement. I leaned back and smiled faintly. After years of being treated like free help, I'd taken my voice back. And more than that, I'd forced a lesson. Without respect and honesty, money, projects, or any plan is just a flimsy illusion. Once the commitment was signed, the house settled into a different kind of quiet. Not tense silence, more like the hush that follows when the noise of pretense has drained away, leaving room for truth to stand. I walked to the storage room where I kept my most cherished things. I unlocked the wooden cabinet, my hands trembling lightly as I turned the old brass key. The door opened, and the familiar scent of wood rose. There it was, the blue and white porcelain set Richard bought for our 30th anniversary. For years I'd been afraid to bring it out, afraid it would be used for showy parties that meant nothing anymore. Today was different. I decided to set it out not to show off, but to mark a new boundary. From here on, this house is for truth and gratitude, not for others to take over and treat me like a shadow. I placed each plate and cup on the table, running my fingers along the smooth rims. The blue patterns on white felt like our years together, building this home. And today, I wanted it to witness a different beginning. That evening, I stood in the dining room under warm light. I drew a breath and told everyone, "Tonight, I don't want a lavish spread or a table set by me alone. I want a simple dinner where each person makes one dish and we share the work. This is more than a meal, it's a lesson. A home isn't here for one person to serve everyone. A home is for carrying things together." The room froze for a few seconds. Chloe blinked, like she couldn't process it, but no one objected. I handed her a cleaning cloth and a small broom. "Chloe, tonight you handle wiping the tables and tidying the dining room." Her lips pressed tight, eyes flickering, but she bent down and started. I watched her slim shoulders quiver, her hand a little clumsy with the cloth. But for the first time, I didn't hear a single complaint. No more, "Why should I do this?" or "This isn't my job." Just the sound of the cloth moving in slow circles. Adrian looked at me and said awkwardly, I'm going to enroll in a financial management course starting next week. I think it's time I learned to handle money instead of leaving it to someone else." I nodded. A small promise, but to me it felt like the first beam of light cutting through heavy cloud. Raphael stayed with us. He stepped into the kitchen and made pizza dough himself, talking as he worked. The smell of yeast and olive oil filled the room, bringing back the memory of honest family dinners from long ago. While rolling the dough, he spoke, his voice ringing like he meant the lesson to sink into the brick. "Self-respect, Helena, is an asset that never loses value. Money goes up and down, projects can fail, but if you keep your self-respect, you can still stand up again. Lose it, and even with a warehouse full of wealth, no one will respect you." I listened, feeling each word carve itself into the walls of the house. Chloe stood still, eyes glossy, whether with shame or emotion, I couldn't tell. Adrian bowed his head as if memorizing every word. Dinner began. On the table were simple dishes, each made by someone. I cooked a light chicken soup, Adrian chopped a salad, and Chloe carried the tray of pizza Raphael had just baked. The aroma rose, but more important was the sense that everyone had a hand in the meal. No more me working alone in the kitchen while others waited. We sat around the table. I looked at the house that for 5 years had felt like a boarding house where I was the unpaid manager. Tonight, it was different. The warm light reflected off the blue and white porcelain and onto faces that had changed, at least a little. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. I set my spoon down, looked at everyone and said, "This house is no longer someone else's boarding house. This is a place for truth and gratitude. If you want to stay, choose truth and gratitude as the foundation. If you can't, the door is always open." I paused, letting my gaze pass over each person, and ended clearly. "If you want to stay for truth and gratitude, have a seat." The room was still for a few seconds. Then Raphael nodded firmly and kept eating his slice of pizza. Adrian looked at me and said softly, "I'll stay, Mom." Chloe said nothing, just set another plate on the table, eyes damp. I didn't need an answer right then. The real answer would be in their actions. When dinner ended, I went to the window and looked out at the yard. Snow had started to fall, dusting the eaves and the fence. I smiled, lighter than ever. This Christmas didn't have flashy bouquets or grand parties, but it had what I'd been searching for all along: the truth. And that truth, bitter as it is the foundation that gives us a chance to start over. I turned and looked straight into the lens because I knew this story wasn't just for my little room but for anyone listening out there. I spoke slowly, sincerely. If you've made it this far, I'd love to know, what city are you in? And in your life, have you ever seen a boundary put up to protect someone's dignity? Share your story in the comments. Maybe your story will be the strength someone else needs. If you feel a connection, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you can stay with me on the next journeys. Thank you for being here tonight. You're the reason this story matters. I ended with a calm smile, and inside me rose a new belief. Once spoken, the truth will always find its companions. I came home without warning after completing the last mission of my military life. I thought I'd hold my son in my arms after years apart, but instead, I found him dying alone in the intensive care unit. And my daughter-in-law, the one I trusted with our family, was partying on a yacht out at sea. I called, and she answered coldly, "Yeah, I'm busy. Talk later." I said nothing, then pulled out my phone and froze all of her accounts. And just 1 hour later, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating with the frantic chaos of someone who had ruthlessly left my son to die without peace. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Valentina Cole, 61 years old, a United States Marine Corps officer who served nearly 4 decades. I've been through more than a dozen war zones, faced gunfire, the smell of blood, and sand. But I never imagined the most painful moment of my life would arrive on a calm morning, right here at home. The plane from Washington landed in San Diego at first light. The first sunbeam slipped through the window and glinted off the pocket watch my father left me. He was a sailor who taught me, there's no mission greater than coming home with integrity. For 40 years I lived by that lesson. It's just, I forgot how far coming home had drifted from me. I walked out of the airport quietly, dragging an old military duffel across the concrete. People like to say retirement is when a soldier has to learn how to live again. For me, it was the journey to find the son I'd been away from too long. Miguel. I called a cab. The driver, a tangent-skinned man who looked like he'd served, struck up a friendly conversation. "You military? I can tell by those bags." I smiled. "Used to be. Now I'm just a mother trying to get home." The words tightened my throat. I had waited so long for this moment. I'd pictured Miguel opening the door, hugging me, saying he missed his mom. I even planned to cook his favorite chili beef, the dish I made when he was in high school. I imagined us sitting on the porch, watching the sunset slide over the ocean like the old days. The car rolled down familiar streets, palms swaying in the morning breeze. Coronado appeared after a curve, a quiet neighborhood where I'd bought Miguel a small house when he first married Valeria. I still remember that day. He hugged me and said, "I don't need anything else, Mom. I just want you to be proud." I laughed and told him he'd made me proud long ago. I didn't know that sentence would haunt me for the rest of my life. The cab stopped in front of 1245 Ocean View Drive. I paid, pulled my bag to the door. Everything looked just like my memory. A white fence, a small flower bed by the path, the wooden sign, the Coles, hanging a little crooked, but there were no sounds, no music, no voices. Only the ocean wind blowing through, cold and empty. I rang the bell. No one came. I called out, "Miguel, honey, I'm home." Only the distant thud of waves. I rang again, then tried the doorknob locked. I went around to the backyard and peered through the kitchen window. The house was pitch black. Wooden chairs were scattered. Cups and plates were a mess. The mailbox by the gate was stuffed with torn letters and flyers. It looked like no one had lived there for weeks. A cold draft brushed the back of my neck and made me shiver. A soldier's instincts told me something was wrong. Right then, a voice called behind me. "Mrs. Cole, is that you, Mrs. Cole?" I turned. It was Mrs. Harriet, Miguel's neighbor. A woman around 70, silver hair, purple sweater, watering can in hand. I walked over. "Oh, Harriet, I just got back this morning. Where's my son? Why is his house like this?" Her face went pale. She hesitated, then sighed. "You didn't know? Miguel was taken to the hospital 2 weeks ago. I heard it was an emergency in the middle of the night. The ambulance came close to midnight." I gripped her hand. "What about Valeria? My daughter-in-law? Why didn't anyone call me?" Harriet shook her head. "She was around the first few days. Then I saw her head out on a yacht with friends. Just yesterday, she posted party photos on Facebook at Newport Beach Marina. I thought you already knew." I went numb. My whole body turned to stone. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, each beat heavy and dry. I asked again, my voice gravelly, like wind through pebbles, "Are you sure Miguel is still in the hospital?" "Yes. Street. Raphael Hospital, downtown San Diego." I nodded, thanked her, and turned away. But my legs wouldn't move. The strength that had gotten me through battlefields seemed to dissolve. I stood frozen on the stone path, staring up at the window where Miguel once waved goodbye on his wedding day. The old curtain still hung there, but behind it was nothing, just a cold, empty, dark. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Valeria's name. I called. It rang and rang. No answer. I called again. This time, music and a woman's voice spilled through the speaker. "Yes, Mom? I'm busy. I'll call you back." "My son, where is he, Valeria?" "I heard he's in the hospital." There was a beat of silence. Then her voice floated back, light as air. Someone must be exaggerating. I'm offshore right now. I'll check when I'm back." And she hung up. I stared at the screen, the blue glow reflecting on my trembling hand. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the world around me. Part of me wanted to scream, but the other part just stood still, quiet, cold, and frighteningly clear. I pulled my bag onto the porch and sat on the steps. Noon sunlight slipped through the leaves and pooled on the stone where Miguel and I used to sit when he was 8. I still remember him asking, "Mom, when I grow up, can I be a soldier like you?" I laughed then and ruffled his hair. "You can be anything, as long as you never forget to come home." Now I was the one who hadn't come home soon enough. A gust of wind sent "The Coles" sign creaking. I stood, took one last look at the house, wilted flowers, a dry lawn, fogged windows. No trace of a home. I knew where I had to go. I rolled my bag back to the gate and waved for a cab. While I waited, I took out the pocket watch. The engraving on the lid was worn, "For those who always come home." The second hand kept sweeping, but for me, time had stopped. A taxi pulled up. The driver opened the door and asked, "Where to, ma'am?" I answered softly, each word like an order, "Street Raphael Hospital." "As fast as you can." We pulled away. San Diego slid past the window-familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. Every light pole, every row of trees made my heart heavier. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to steady my breathing, but Harriet's words kept echoing. "Your son's been in the hospital for 2 weeks." I looked down at the watch. The minute hand ticked forward 1 notch. 1 hour, that's all it took to go from the airport home, then from home to the hospital. Just 1 hour, and somehow my whole life had collapsed. I leaned back, tears falling before I knew it. I've watched comrades go down, but I've never felt a loss tear me apart like this. Not war, not an enemy, just the silence between people who were supposed to love each other. Outside, the sun was high. The ocean flashed silver blue. Somewhere out there, maybe Valeria was raising a glass on a yacht, laughing with friends. And me, a mother returning after 40 years of service, was racing across the city with a fear I'd never faced. That when I arrived, I wouldn't get to hear my son say, "Mom," one more time. Street. Raphael Hospital rose out of downtown like a giant block of concrete, cold and slick under the noon Sunday. I walked into the main lobby. Disinfectant hung in the air while the PA called names in steady bursts. Nurses' rubber soles skimmed the floor, making the place feel like a barracks, impersonal, precise, disciplined. But inside that order, my heart thrashed like I was stepping into another war zone, the battlefield of loss. I stepped up to the front desk and set both hands on the cold counter. "Excuse me, I'm looking for a patient, Miguel Cole." The young nurse glanced up, scanned her screen, and said softly, "Intensive care, 5th floor, room 512. Just a number," and it crushed my chest. I nodded thanks and hurried to the elevators, a soft ding as the doors opened. The mirror inside threw back my reflection, a woman with graying hair and an old field jacket on her shoulders. Under the dim lights, my face was set, my eyes deep and dry as a desert. As the doors slid shut, I inhaled and tried to hold a steady breath. With each floor that passed, it felt like I was climbing down stair by stair into hell. On 5, the doors opened to a long white hallway, fluorescent lights casting a cold sheen on the tile. The monitor's beep-beep echoed everywhere, each beat a knife's edge. I walked slowly, my hand tightening around the pocket watch in my jacket, the last thread tying me to the past, to family, to the reason I came back. Room 512 was ajar. I nudged it open, and a blast of chilled air washed over me with the tang of disinfectant and metal. Miguel, my only son, lay there. He was so thin I had to grab the chair to stay upright. The thick black hair was now patchy, his skin was ashen. Tubes and IV lines ran everywhere, wrists, chest, nose. Every breath was a frayed thread. I barely recognized my boy. A primal fear surged in my chest. I'd seen men dying on battlefields, but I never imagined I'd see this, my son, fading away in solitude. Next to the bed, a middle-aged doctor was jotting notes. His badge read, "Julian Rivera, MD," I asked, voice shaking. "Doctor, my son, what happened to him?" He looked up, eyes tired, voice even like he'd said these words 100 times. "Are you the patient's family?" "I'm his mother." He nodded, closed the chart, and spoke quietly. "He has late-stage stomach cancer. By the time he was brought in, it had metastasized. We can only manage pain and sustain life. If he'd been treated earlier, he might have had another year or two." My head spun. "Cancer? Late stage?" I repeated like I'd lost my mind. He didn't answer. He just exhaled, a flicker of sympathy in eyes that weren't warm enough. "No one told me," I whispered. "No one called me." Julian lowered his voice. "We tried the registered family number, but no one answered. No one has visited in the past 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks while I was at my retirement ceremony, receiving a Medal of Honor. 2 weeks while Valeria, my daughter-in-law, was posting wine glasses from a yacht. I stood there with fists clenched so tight my nails broke skin. No words came. My throat locked. The tears wouldn't fall. I could only step forward and place my hand over my son's. His hand was ice cold, thin, knuckles jutting like dry twigs. "Miguel," I whispered, voice breaking. "I'm here, baby. Mom came home." White light bounced across his face. His eyelids trembled. I leaned closer, so close I could hear my own ragged breath. "Can you hear me, honey?" His lips moved. I had to bend down to catch it. "Mom!" Barely a breath. "Mom, I love you." It felt like my heart shattered in my chest. I wanted to say, "I love you too," but my throat seized. I only gripped his hand harder, trying to pour my warmth into him. Suddenly, the monitor's beep stretched into a steady tone, a flat line slicing the air. The room went dead silent. "No, no, no, Miguel, baby," I cried, nearly collapsing. "Doctor." Julian slammed the code button. 2 nurses rushed in with a crash cart. They pulled me back. "Please step outside, ma'am." I shook my head, shouting, "No, I won't leave my son!" But They pushed me out and the door thudded shut, leaving me alone in the freezing hallway. Through the small window I watched them work compressions, meds, calling his name. It all blurred, waterlogged by tears. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Finally, Dr. Julian stepped out. He peeled off his gloves, face heavy. We did everything we could. I went still. No scream, no collapse. Just a vacancy spreading from my heart to the tips of my fingers. I turned toward room 512, the place where my son had just left this world. When the nurse pulled the white sheet over his face, I walked back in. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I sat beside the bed, lifted the sheet, and smoothed what little hair he had left. He looked peaceful, too peaceful, but I knew that last pain hadn't been gentle. I held his wrist the same place I held when I taught him to swim in Coronado, the same place I grabbed to pull him ashore when the waves were too strong. Now it was cold. "You're gone, Miguel," I murmured, voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I wasn't there when you needed me most." A faint draft from the vent stirred the curtain. The cold, white light felt like it was shining straight through my soul. I drew a deep breath, tears dropping onto his hand, then lifted my head. I'd learned in war that a soldier doesn't go down before the mission is complete. And now I wasn't allowed to fall because my final mission was to uncover the truth about my son's death. I pulled my phone from my jacket and wiped my cheeks with the back of my hand. The screen lit up, reflecting an old face with swollen eyes, yet the look had changed. No more despair, only a cold resolve. I opened the banking app. The words, "Joint account, Miguel and Valeria Cole" appeared. I stared for a few seconds, then tapped, "Freeze account." A prompt popped up. "Are you sure?" I pressed, "Yes." The screen flashed. "All linked accounts have been frozen." I closed the phone, my hand trembling slightly. But for the first time in hours, I felt myself breathing. Not because I was relieved, but because I had begun to fight. Outside, the sun was sinking behind the hospital, washing the glass with orange light. A nurse passed and gave me a small nod, but I didn't answer. I just stood there, looking at the white sheet on the bed where my son once laughed, once lived, and now only silence remained. I laid my hand on the sheet and whispered, "Rest now, baby. I'll take care of the rest." Then I turned away and walked out of the intensive care unit, each step heavier with pain, but inside me, a fire had been lit. This time, I wouldn't fight for the military. I would fight for my son's justice. I don't remember how long I stood outside the recovery room after the nurse pulled the white sheet over my son's face. The fifth-floor hallway was still bright, but to me that white light felt piercing, cold as metal. People walked past, chatting, chuckling softly, as if nothing had just happened, as if Miguel's death were just another line item in the end-of-day report. I left the ICU and walked down the hall to a row of seats by the window. Outside, the sky was tipping toward evening, the sunset tinting the glass red. My hand trembled as I set my phone on my lap. I took a deep breath and called Valeria. It rang a few times. Then an electronic dance track burst on, loud, busy. Laughter, clinking wine glasses, waves crashing mixed into the beat. On the other end, Valeria's voice came light, flat, distant. "Yes, Mom? What's going on?" I swallowed. My voice came out hoarse. "Miguel is gone." Silence for a few seconds. I could hear the ocean wind, people cheering, and then she spoke again, calm to a frightening degree. "Yeah? I'm busy. Talk later." A dry click. The call ended. I sat still. The hallway noise faded. The world around me stopped in a silence so deep it felt eerie. Only my heartbeat remained pounding, sharp with pain. I stared at the phone screen. The words, "Call ended," lit up, then went dark. I didn't cry. I couldn't. A mother had just lost her child and still had to hear her daughter-in-law talk about her husband's death like it was nothing. I leaned my head against the wall, letting the cold sink into my skin. Images crossed over each other in my mind. Miguel as a little boy laughing hard while I taught him archery on the beach. Miguel at 15, hugging me tight when I got orders for the Middle East. Miguel on his wedding day, looking at Valeria with total trust. Now those memories felt like film being burned, only ash left. A slight shiver went through me. I muttered, mostly to myself, if she can be that cold, I'll be colder. I stood, straightened my jacket. Air from the vent lifted the hem like a reminder that I still had something to do. On the first floor, I found the administrative office. A young staffer met me with tired eyes and asked, "How can I help you, ma'am?" "I'm here to collect the personal belongings of patient Miguel Cole." He nodded, stepped away for a few minutes, then returned with a clear plastic bag. "These are the patient's belongings. We've inventoried them: wallet, watch, phone, IDs. I took the bag with both hands, afraid I might drop the whole world. Through the cloudy plastic, I saw a worn brown leather wallet, the gift I gave Miguel when he turned 20. A silver wristwatch with a scratched crystal. I remembered it was a discounted piece he bought after his first paycheck, proud enough to show me on a video call. And the phone with the cracked corner, the one he used to send me the last photo. He and Valeria smiling in front of the new house. I gripped the bag until my fingers went white. Each item was a blade cutting deep, yet forcing me to hold on, because they weren't just keepsakes, they were witnesses to the weeks he'd been abandoned, and to Valeria's brutal indifference. The staffer hesitated. "We also have the medical file, if you'd like to take it." I nodded. A few minutes later, he brought a thick stack of papers in a hard folder. "All treatment info, test results, admission dates. Please sign here." I signed. The pen shook because my hand wouldn't steady. When he left, I sat on a plastic chair by the door and opened the file. The first page read, "Patient, Miguel Cole. Diagnosis, stomach cancer, stage 4. Admission date, April 6th. Emergency contact, Valeria Cole, spouse." I stopped at the last line, "No visitor record." I closed the file and stared. 2 weeks, 2 full weeks with no one by my son's side. No one holding his hand, no voice saying, "Stay strong." I'd sent Valeria money regularly, believing she was caring for him. But now it was brutally clear that money never bought even a minute of genuine love. I stood, took the bag and the file, and walked outside. The afternoon sun hit hard enough that I had to squint. People streamed past the hospital entrance, busy, living, laughing, kissing each other goodbye, while I stood there with a bag holding what was left of my child. A sea breeze carried salt and gasoline. I lifted my head to the sky, feeling a thin fog drift over my eyes. Miguel was gone, but I knew my fight had just begun. I sat on a bench by the entrance and opened the bag. I laid each item across my lap. The leather wallet there was a small dried bloodstain at the corner. I opened it and found a few neatly folded bills, a bank card, and a small photo. Me and Miguel in front of the old house in Coronado, both smiling bright. The photo was worn, the corners curled, but Miguel's eyes were still shining, as innocent as ever. I brushed a finger over his face and whispered, "Rest easy, baby. I won't let it end like this." I slipped the photo into my pocket, then picked up Miguel's phone. The screen was cracked, but it lit when I pressed the power button. The passcode was his birthday, I knew it, so the screen opened on the first try. The recent calls were all banks, clinics, and a few unread texts. Not a single call from Valeria. I opened the first text. "Your payment of $3,500 has been received. Yacht Club Marina." I read it slowly, each word heating inside me. One question rose. While my son was hospitalized, what exactly was she spending money on? I closed the phone and put it away. When I looked up, the sunset was almost gone. Palm shadows stretched across the pavers, pulling in the evening chill. I held my father's pocket watch and felt the steady tick, the rhythm of time, of unfinished business. A nurse walked by and asked quietly, "Do you need anything else, ma'am?" I gave a weak smile. "No, thank you. I just need a few minutes to say goodbye." She nodded and moved on. I stood and slowly made my way to the hospital gate. With each step, my heels echoed on the cold concrete like a slow drum for a farewell. I stopped at the sign that read Street Raphael Medical Center. Yellow light washed over the metal letters so they glowed in the dusk. I spoke softly, almost like a vow. "Son, I promise, she won't touch another dime." I turned and walked away. My shadow stretched across the ground, fading into the last strips of sunlight. In my hand, the plastic bag rustled, a small sound heavier than any load I'd carried in 40 years in uniform, because this time I wasn't carrying a weapon or orders. Only the pain and the resolve of a mother who had been betrayed. Night fell, San Diego's sky hazed with a thin mist, streetlights laying gold down the quiet road. I went back to Miguel's house, the place that used to be his home. 40 years in the military taught me to face anything: war, casualties, fear, but tonight, all I felt was cold and empty. The old key in my pocket felt like a rock. When it slid into the lock, the dry click broke the stale air, heavy with damp and old wine. One deep breath wasn't enough to push back the rot. The smell of abandonment. The room was black. Porch light leaked through the window and drew long gray streaks across the floor. I flipped the switch. A weak yellow bulb flickered and came on, revealing a scene that squeezed my heart. A lipstick-stained wine glass on the table, a moldy pizza box left to rot, a perfume bottle rolling under the sofa, and dust so thick on the floor my footprints were printed clear where I'd stepped. There was no sign of illness, no care, no nights spent sitting up for someone you love. Only the leftover trash of parties and a guilty silence. On the table, buried under fashion magazines and loose papers, a stack of documents had slipped out. Heavy stock, stained with dried wine, printed with numbers that chilled me. The first bill was from Marina Bay Charter Service, 3-day yacht rental, $148,000. Next page. Cartier Beverly Hills diamond necklace, $192,500. After that, Hotel La Valencia Presidential Suite, $29,000. Every page carried the same line: paid by Miguel Cole. The numbers lined up neat and cold, like a verdict. I paused at the payment dates. My heart dropped. All of them matched the time Miguel was in the ICU, fighting for his last breaths. My eyes burned, but I wouldn't let myself cry. Feelings were useless now. I quietly pulled out my phone and photographed each bill, each number. The screen's light washed over my shaking hands and threw my aging face back in the window, a mother turning pain into evidence. At the end of the stack, a thin envelope was partially folded. Inside was a bank payment confirmation with Valeria's digital signature. A small note in the corner: emergency authorization, paid with Miguel's card. Emergency! I almost laughed, a sound as dry as a spent shell. The irony of calling a yacht party an emergency. A cold draft cut through the cracked window and stirred the dusty curtain. On the table, a half-empty bottle tilted and rolled a little, making a faint clink. I looked around. Everything bore Valeria's mark: heels tossed on the floor, a lipstick tube under the chair, a silk scarf thrown over the armrest. Everything suggested a woman living in luxury, but in this house there was no trace of Miguel's warmth. By the bookshelf, a brown leather journal lay still. I opened it and knew the handwriting instantly: my son's. The first page was neat. February. Valeria said she needed $30,000 for medicine. March. $50,000 to pay hospital bills. Insurance suspended. April. $40,000 to fix the roof. In the margin, a small note with ink blurred by water: she promised she'd pay me back when I get better. The date was 3 days before he was admitted. A sharp ache rose to my throat. Each line felt like a knife pressing into my palm as I held the journal. Miguel still trusted her to the very end, while his money was buying champagne and diamond necklaces. I didn't want to turn the page, afraid the next lines would kill whatever faith I had left in my son's marriage. But something in me pushed me to read on. Near the end, Miguel wrote, "Mom, I'm scared. Valeria has changed. She's hiding something and I don't dare ask. If I don't make it, please tell Mom I tried my best." The last line was smeared, like his hand shook too hard to write more. I set the journal down, held my head in both hands, and sat in silence. Outside, the far-off waves sounded like a faint heartbeat still echoing in memory. After a while, I stood and opened the desk drawer. In the back was an old laptop, scuffed screen, dusty. I hit the power button, and the fan whirred to life. The password was Miguel's birthday 0817. The screen lit up, reflecting my hollow eyes. The email sent folder showed a string of messages. At the top was one titled Yacht Party, full booking confirmation. Sent from Valeria's address, paid with Miguel's card. I read every confirmation line, every e-signature, every charge. There wasn't a hint of hesitation. She knew exactly what she was doing and knew no one would check, because the only person who could have noticed was lying between life and death. Another attachment was labeled Menu and Guest List. I opened it. First line, Champagne Armand de Brignac, 20 bottles, more than 30 guests, all names I didn't know. I saved everything. The cold light from the screen washed over my face until the whole room felt steel gray. What I felt wasn't rage anymore, it was a cold, absolute resolve. As I stepped away from the desk, a glint in the cabinet corner made me stop. A frame lay face down, glass cracked. I picked it up. It was a wedding photo. Miguel smiling gently, Valeria leaning on his shoulder, eyes sweet for the camera. On the back, a handwritten line, "To my forever partner." I let out a quiet laugh. No sound, just bitterness stuck in my throat. The night deepened. Moonlight slid through the curtains, tracing the stained walls where my son's memories used to hang. I moved through the house, collecting every piece of evidence. Bills, photos, notes, emails. I saved it all into one folder on my phone and named it simply For Miguel. When I finished, I sat by the window. Outside, the sea hummed low, the familiar sound of Coronado, where my son grew up. I opened the leather journal again, my hands shaking as I read the last line. "Mom, if I don't make it, please forgive me for loving the wrong person." My throat tightened. I ran my fingers softly over the line, then closed the journal and spoke to the air, barely above a whisper. "No, Miguel, I won't forgive her. Not yet." I stood and stepped out of the house. The ocean wind hit hard, mixing the smell of wine with jasmine from the front yard. Yellow light washed across the half-broken "The Coles" sign. The remaining letters swung in the wind, creaking with a sad little groan. On the empty street, my shadow stretched long across the ground, dragging along pain and silence. In my hand, my father's pocket watch kept ticking tiny beats cutting through the night, like a countdown to what was coming. I stopped at the gate and looked back at the house drowned in darkness. Every door, every curtain frame told its story in the quietest way, the story of a man betrayed in his own home. I gripped my phone and looked down at the photos I'd just saved. Bills, the journal, emails, social media, it was all there. Every detail enough to prove one truth. Valeria wasn't just careless. Her greed and lies cost Miguel his life. A gust blew through, cold and strong, lifting my hair. I inhaled and squared my shoulders. From here on out, everything would be different. I was no longer the grieving mother who had just lost her son, but the woman who would make justice speak. And that night, in the sound of waves and the sting of salt, I knew one thing for certain. Valeria had no idea she'd picked the wrong person to cross. It was nearly dawn when I got back to the motel near the Coronado docks. The room's yellow light spread faintly across the mirror, where my face stared back older, harder, quieter than ever. Every muscle was still braced like the years I wore a uniform, not a single minute allowed for weakness. But what I was about to do tonight wasn't in any military training manual. I made a cup of black coffee and set my laptop on the wooden desk. The screen lit my face while the phone lay still beside it, contacts open to a familiar name, Javier Ortega. He was an old friend from my Afghanistan years, a military finance specialist who, after discharge, kept working at the Defense Finance and Accounting Service. If anyone could help me with this, it was Javier. I drew a deep breath and hit call. His voice came low and slightly raspy on the line. "Valentina? Lord, I thought you dropped off the map. I just read about your retirement ceremony. Congrats, Lady General." I didn't answer with a laugh, just a sigh. "Nothing to celebrate, Javier. I need a favor, and it's serious." The shift in my tone made him go silent at once. Typing sounds stopped. "What happened?" I told him. Every detail. From Miguel's death to the yacht invoices, the social media photos, the party emails. I spoke slowly, skipped nothing, kept emotion out of it. When I finished, all I heard was his heavy breathing. "Miguel was your son?" he asked again, voice tight. "Yes. I'm so sorry." "I don't need sorry, Javier. I need justice." Silence for a few seconds. Then he spoke softly, almost like a vow. "Okay. Tell me what you need me to do." I opened my bag, took out the file I'd compiled, and sent every image and copy through the old encrypted channel we used in the service. The password was still our team's mantra: honor never sleeps. "Can you verify my power of attorney?" I asked. "Yes. I still have the old authorization from Miguel, from when he did civilian logistics at Coronado. It's valid, no one revoked it." I heard the keyboard again, that cold, familiar sound, the sound of action. "You're sure?" Javier asked. "If I enter this order, every account under Miguel and his wife's names will be frozen. Sub-accounts, credit cards, everything." "I'm sure." He exhaled and kept typing. "All right. Give me 10 minutes." I checked my father's pocket watch. The second hand crept. Each tick felt like a tight heartbeat in the silence. Outside the window, the ocean wind was strong. The curtain lifted, and the hot coffee on the table trembled. About 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. An encrypted message popped up. Status: accounts frozen. Action completed. Ortega. That was it. No sirens, no gunfire, no smoke, but I knew a war had begun. Right after, the phone buzzed again. Valeria's number. I stared at the glowing screen in the dark, my fingers steady. I hadn't planned to answer, but the ringing kept on, and on the 5th round I tapped accept. Her voice cut in sharp as metal. "Are you insane?" I said nothing. "You had no right. That account is mine. I'll sue you." Still silent. Her pitch rose, starting to shake. "Are you hearing me? I need money. It's an emergency." I let her talk, listening only to her frantic breathing. Then suddenly, her tone softened, velvety. "I'm sorry. I panicked. I need money for hospital bills. Can we talk?" "Hospital bills?" I almost laughed. "You should ask your husband about hospital bills," I said quietly, my voice so cold and steady it surprised even me. What are you saying?" "Your husband doesn't need hospital bills anymore, Valeria. He's gone, and don't ever call me again." I hung up and let the long, empty tones stretch through the room. The coffee had gone cold. The bitterness in the air matched the taste of my anger. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom. It starts the moment you dare to speak the truth someone else keeps running from. Have you ever had to stay calm in the face of betrayal? Share it with me in the comments, so anyone who's been there knows they aren't alone. That night I chose to act like a soldier trained to survive chaos. Don't cry, don't wait, just move. I went back to Miguel's house with a lock change kit. Front door, back door. Even the windows I swapped every lock, each turn of the screwdriver ringing firm like my heartbeat coming back online. On the door I placed a seal. Property of Military Finance Department under review. Neighbors glanced over, surprised, but no one asked. I knew they were scared. In the military we say, when a soldier comes home without a smile, it's best not to stand in their way. When I finished, I brought Miguel's bag inside and set it on the table. His silver watch sat under the light, the crystal flashing like a thin blade. I opened my laptop, hooked up a drive, and started backing up everything from his computer emails, notes, bank transactions, photos. Each file stored and encrypted the way I'd taught young troops to protect data in the field. Keys clacked steadily, never stopping. Outside, wind whistled through the frame and carried salt air, but I didn't feel cold. I felt wide awake. In the middle of the night, my phone lit up again. A stream of messages from Valeria poured in. You'll regret this. I have friends-in-law. I'm sorry. I overreacted. Please, I need money urgently. Can we talk? The lines danced on the screen, mixed with pleading emojis and fake hearts. I watched them for a long moment, then locked the screen. No reply, no emotion. Only one rule in my head: don't negotiate with a traitor. Close to 3 a.m., the last backup finished. I closed the laptop and leaned back. On the table, papers, bank cards, and Miguel's leather journal lay side by side like a formation ready to deploy. Outside, the ocean started to kick up. I could hear the water hitting the rocks like the nights I patrolled the Pacific, just me and the wind. In the dark, anything can be an enemy except resolve. I poured more coffee and looked out at the window glowing with first light. Thin rays slipped through the haze and fell across the line. I'd written in my notebook, Day 1 without Miguel. Day 1 of being a soldier again. On the table, my father's pocket watch ticked evenly. I flipped it open and read the engraving. For those who always come home. For the first time, I understood it completely. Because this time, I wasn't coming home to rest. I came home to fight not with a gun, but with the truth. I stood, shut the laptop, and looked around the quiet room. On the door, the military seal caught the morning light like a warning. I inhaled and felt my blood heat up again, each beat strong, decisive. A new war had begun, and I knew there are battles a soldier wins with mind and will no gunfire needed. The next morning, San Diego's sky was steel gray. Thick clouds drifted over the water, reflecting a cold silver. I sat in the car, hands on the wheel, staring at the glass building ahead, Attorney Armando Ruiz's office. A hard gust snapped the flag out front. I breathed deep and reminded myself, this wasn't just a family matter anymore. It was a case that needed daylight. I'd heard Ruiz's name from Javier Ortega. He'd been a special prosecutor in family financial abuse cases, a man who feared no power and took no pity on people who played weak. In the past, he'd helped many veterans reclaim assets stolen by relatives. Now, I just hoped he was tough enough to go the distance with me. I pushed through the door. The office sat on the third floor of a modern building, big glass walls facing the shore. Dim light slid over shelves, packed with files. Coffee mingled with the smell of new paper. A young assistant led me into a conference room where Armando Ruiz stood waiting, tall, salt and pepper hair, a fitted gray suit, eyes sharp like someone used to reading truth through lies. "Mrs. Cole?" he said, offering his hand in a gravelly voice shaped by too many trials. "I'm Valentina," I answered, gripping firmly enough to make him raise an eyebrow. "We Saturday." I set 3 neatly bound files in front of him. "Everything I have," I said. "Bank statements, spending invoices, messages, and my son's journal." Ruiz opened each binder. His eyes moved fast, pausing to mark pages. He lifted a brow at the yacht bills. "The same day he was in the ICU?" "Yes." "And paid with his card?" "All of it. I have bank confirmations." nodded slightly, pulled out a red pen, and began marking page after page, his voice steady like he was drafting a verdict, enough to charge financial abuse, misappropriation, and possibly spousal fraud. I stayed quiet, looking at my hands on my knee. The knuckles stood out, but I'd never felt them stronger. "Can you help me?" Ruiz looked up. His eyes weren't those of a lawyer counting hours. They were the eyes of someone who understood silent pain. "I can, but you'll need to be ready for a long, dirty fight. Someone like Valeria won't fold. She'll cry, she'll beg, she'll say you're out for revenge." I gave a small smile with no warmth. "I'm not seeking revenge, Mr. Ruiz. I want justice to be called by its name." He studied me a few seconds, then nodded. "All right, let's begin." He pulled a dark blue folder from a drawer labeled Case Preparation, Financial Abuse. His voice shifted into the cadence of a man who'd led many cases. "First, I need the attending physician's statement confirming Miguel's condition on admission that he wasn't capable of managing his finances. I can get it from Dr. Julian Patel at Street Raphael. He witnessed my son's final days." "Good. The more detail, the better. Exact admit time, any coma notes, anything proving he couldn't authorize transactions." He wrote, then turned a page. "Next is freezing all of Valeria's assets, house, car, savings. We'll rely on your authority to manage the estate as mother and legal heir since Miguel died intestate. I'll draft the motion now." He looked at me, waiting. I nodded without hesitation. "Do it. Every dollar I sent my son was earned with sweat. I will take it back not for the money, but for his honor." Ruiz wrote quickly, his voice even, not needing to look at the page. "Honor money can't buy that. And you, Mrs. Cole, aren't just reclaiming money. You're reclaiming your son's honor." A chill ran down my spine. He wasn't being cliché. His words hit the deepest part of me, the part that believed in a soldier's honor, in a vow to protect what's right. When the papers finished printing, Ruiz slid them to me and pointed at the last line, "Sign here. From now on, Valeria's assets will be temporarily frozen pending judgment. She'll be notified within 3 days." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. Signing that form didn't feel like a legal action, it felt like declaring war. Ruiz gathered every document into a hard folder, then looked up at me. "I need you absolutely silent until the file reaches the court. If Valeria reaches out, don't react. Let her expose herself. People like that, once they lose access to money, show us who they really are." I nodded slightly. "I learned that on the battlefield. When the enemy panics, you just stand still." Ruiz gave a faint smile, rare amid all the files. "I don't think I've ever had someone talk to a lawyer like they're planning an operation, Mrs. Cole." "Old habits die hard," I said, low. When I stepped out of the office, late sun was hitting the distant shore. Waves slammed the breakwater, light shattering into silver shards. I stopped and drew in the familiar salt air. Everything seemed to slow, but inside me, something was moving strong, organized, like a unit being called to formation. My anger wasn't boiling anymore. It had cooled, heavy and sharp, like steel forged in fire. I knew exactly what I was doing, step by step. My stride was firmer as I left the building. In the sun, my shadow stretched long on the sidewalk, back straight, shoulders open, not a grieving mother anymore, but a fighter with a target. In my head, Ruiz's words replayed, "You're reclaiming your son's honor. Yes, honor, not with tears, but with justice." When I reached the car, my phone buzzed a text from Javier Ortega. "Heard you're working with Ruiz. He's good, but cold. Stay strong, Valentina. This war has no bullets, but it has consequences." I smiled. Wind moved through my hair, carrying the ocean's salt. I looked out toward the horizon, where the water flashed like broken mirrors. Suddenly, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Valeria, not of court, not of being isolated. I feared only one thing, that if I didn't act, Miguel would be buried forever in silence. I started the engine. The low, steady rumble sounded like a heartbeat coming back to life, like a soldier returning to the fight. Ahead of me, sunset spread across the sea. And in that light, I whispered, "Son, I've started. This time, I won't back down." On the first day of the hearing, San Diego lay under a gray rain. The sky was heavy, droplets clinging to the car windows like a thick curtain. I sat in the back row, hands clasped on my knees, eyes fixed on the county courthouse, a white building with wide steps, tall stone columns, and the American flag snapping in the damp wind. Every step I'd take today, I knew, would be the first in bringing my son's honor back. Ruiz met me at the gate. He wore a black suit, hair silvered and a bit wet from the mist. "You holding up, Valentina?" I answered softly, my voice strangely calm. "Better than ever." He nodded, opened his case, and checked the file one last time. "Everything's ready." The judge called an expedited hearing because the accounts are in dispute. Today we only need enough evidence to maintain control over the estate. I squeezed his hand lightly. "I don't need a win. I need the truth to be heard." He gave me a look that said more than any comfort could. Inside, the courtroom air was thick. Rain tapped the dome while spectators murmured. When the back door opened, Valeria walked in designer black dress, soft curls, makeup crafted to look tired and grieving. But the flicker at her lips told a different story. She glanced at me, then looked away and glided to the defense table. Her lawyer, a young man in a bright red tie, nodded to the judge and said crisply, "Your Honor, my client is in deep emotional distress after her husband's death." Ruiz didn't look over. He stood straight, his words clear and clipped. "And your client contributed to that death." The room froze. I could hear my own breathing. The judge, a stern-eyed, middle-aged woman, tapped her gavel. "Mr. Ruiz, present your evidence." Ruiz opened his laptop, connected to the big screen behind him. The projector light filled the space, reflecting off the wall and every face watching. He spoke slowly, with the force of someone who'd tried hundreds of cases. Exhibit 1, the bank statements of the deceased, Miguel Cole, who passed on April 18th. Every transaction from the start of the month through admission was executed by his wife, Valeria Cole. Total spending over 3 weeks is nearly $450,000, including yacht rentals, jewelry, and luxury hotels. Valeria smirked softly and leaned toward her lawyer, as if this were all a misunderstanding. Ruiz went on, Exhibit 2, public social media posts and photos by the defendant during the same period. Please look. On the screen, Valeria appeared red wine in hand, sunlight on tan skin, beaming among friends. The caption beneath read, "Freedom feels good." Ruiz said, "Taken on April 10th, the day Miguel was admitted in critical condition." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge's eyes cut to Valeria, cold. She dropped her gaze, lips trembling, still trying to look composed. Ruiz clicked to the next slide, the statement from Dr. Julian Patel. He read evenly. Patient Miguel Cole admitted with terminal gastric cancer. No family present. If treated earlier, prognosis could have been at least 12 additional months. The room fell silent. Only the rain kept ticking against the windows. Ruiz turned to the judge, voice low. "Your Honor, we are not asking for sympathy. We ask one simple question. While her husband lay dying, why was the defendant partying on a yacht with his money?" The judge tapped the gavel lightly. "Mrs. Cole, would you like to make a statement?" I stood. My hands were steady, my voice was low but clear. "I don't want revenge. I don't want payback. I want to know, does anyone deserve to be left to die like that? A man who trusted, who loved, who gave his life to someone, only to leave this world alone while his wife raised a glass at sea? No one spoke. Ruiz gave me a slight nod, a quiet steadiness. Valeria's lawyer jumped up, straightening his tie, words rushing out as if silence itself would sink them. Your Honor, this is emotional speculation. The account funds were marital property. The defendant had full rights to use them. Mr. Cole's death is tragic, but his illness was incurable. My client was simply trying to go on living. That is not a crime. The gavel cracked once more. Order. Call Dr. Julian Patel. The rear door opened. Dr. Patel walked in wearing a white coat, face set. He stood at the witness stand, took the oath, then looked straight ahead. Mr. Miguel Cole arrived in the ER with severe blood loss and profound weakness. If treated earlier, he could have lived at least one more year. I should add, when asked about family, he said, "My wife is busy." The courtroom went dead quiet. Each word dropped like metal on stone. My chest tightened, but I stayed upright and stared at Valeria. She wouldn't meet my eyes, hands gripping each other until her knuckles went white. Ruiz stepped forward. Dr. Patel, during the patient's stay, did anyone visit him? No one. Thank you. He turned to the judge with a slight bow. That concludes our presentation. We request a temporary order to freeze all disputed assets to prevent transfer or concealment. The other side reacted hard. The young lawyer sprang up, voice sharp. Objection! There is no proof my client intends to avoid financial responsibility. Ruiz lifted an eyebrow. If burning through nearly $500,000 while her husband is dying isn't avoidance, then what is? A small "oh" rolled from the gallery. The judge struck the gavel harder. Order in the court. Then she looked directly at Valeria. Mrs. Cole, do you wish to respond to these allegations? Valeria swallowed, trying to hold it together, but her voice shook, edged with spite. I loved my husband. I couldn't stand seeing him in pain. I needed a little time to escape it. I did nothing wrong. It was our money, and I wanted to keep living. The judge's face didn't change. She looked back over the file, then tapped the gavel. After reviewing the materials, testimony, and exhibits, the court issues the following temporary order. Freeze all assets of Valeria Cole. Grant estate and account control to Mrs. Valentina Cole pending further hearings. The gavel struck 3 clean times, ending the session. Valeria shot up, screaming, "You'll regret this! You can't steal my life from me!" 2 officers moved in, took her by the arms, and led her out. Her heels cracked against the stone floor, tangled with sobs and pointless curses. I stayed seated, no gloating, no joy. Only a cold, hollow space inside me, as if what was left of my soul had burned away in that courtroom. As they took Valeria out, I stood, smoothed my jacket, and turned to Ruiz. He nodded, a brief smile passing not victory, but acknowledgement. Justice had started to move. Cold air met us outside. I looked up at the sky, where the clouds were beginning to break, a thin strip of light after the rain. Across the street, the ocean murmured, waves lining up to crash white against the rocks. For the first time in weeks, my heart beat normally. Not fast, not erratic, just sure. I spoke softly, as if Miguel could hear. See, son? Justice took its first step, and I'm still here to carry the rest for you. My anger wasn't blazing anymore. It had cooled into steel, cold, bright, and sharp. Justice doesn't need flames to burn. It only needs someone steady enough to keep the flame from going out. That was how I chose to honor my son, not with a headstone, but with lives saved from his pain. I used what remained after the court freeze and launched the Miguel Foundation for low-income cancer patients abandoned by family. Ruiz handled the legal work. Javier sent a message. You've turned pain into a mission. Miguel would be proud. In the first week, the foundation covered meds and beds for 12 people. I went with the volunteer team through each ward, signing small invoices with a heavy heart. Every room smelled the same: medicine, rusty metal, and despair. Every face looked the same: tired, quiet, longing for a hand to hold. One afternoon, while I reviewed the new patient list, the head nurse called me over. "Mrs. Valentina, we have a new boy." "No family," records say, "orphan. He's quiet, very polite." I followed her to room 214. The door was ajar, weak light slipping past a pale green curtain. On the bed, a tiny boy lay curled up, head bald, skin so pale it was almost see-through. When I stepped closer, his dark eyes opened wide, bright and unbearably sad. "Hi there," I said softly. "I'm Valentina." He nodded a little, voice just a breath. "Ma'am, do I have to stay here all by myself forever?" That question sliced right through me. I saw Miguel again in my mind, my son on that hospital bed, alone, with no one there. I sat down and took the small hand in mine. "No, sweetheart," I said. "From now on, you'll never be alone again." The file said his name was Diego Morales, 8 years old, leukemia, parents killed in a crash last year. He'd been moved from a group home when his condition worsened. No visitors, no one paying. The bills. I signed the treatment funding paperwork to cover all of his costs through the foundation. Then I hired a private nurse to care for Diego and ordered the snacks and comic books he liked. Every time I came, he gave me a small smile and said shyly, "Ma'am, I feel better today." I smiled and patted his head. "Good job, little soldier." A week later, Diego started getting used to the long infusions. I went to the hospital every afternoon and sat reading to him. One day, when I reached the part where the boy in the story finds his mother again, Diego gently interrupted. "Ma'am, is Miguel somewhere up in the sky too?" I froze, then nodded, my voice tight. "Yes, sweetheart, Miguel is in a very bright place, and I'm sure her son is looking down at you and smiling." He smiled small, but it lit up the whole room. In that moment, I heard Miguel's laughter drift back, warm and close like a breeze. I understood that some things are lost but never truly disappear. They return in another form, gentler, softer. Every time I looked at Diego, I felt I was seeing the kindest part left in this world. He was fragile but always tried not to complain. When the nurse came to give a shot, he held my hand and whispered, "Ma'am, I'm not scared. I'm strong." I turned away to hide my tears. His words were like a small hand lifting me out of my own abyss. One afternoon, with the last sunlight slanting through the window, Diego lay on his side holding the comic I'd just bought. He looked up and spoke in a voice light as wind. "If I get better, can I help you take care of the others?" I smiled softly and touched his cheek. "You don't have to promise anything, Diego. Just having you here already helps me." From that day on, I didn't go to the hospital carrying grief, I carried comfort. I sat by his bed for hours, coloring with him, telling stories, and sometimes just sitting quietly watching the rain outside the window. Once, he fell. Asleep on my arm, breathing steady, face so peaceful I forgot there were ventilators, disinfectant, and the steady beeping of a heart monitor all around us. I took a photo and kept it on my phone. In it, Diego is smiling, bright eyes, a gap-toothed grin, just like Miguel at 8 years old. Whenever my screen lights up, I hear that laugh, the laugh I thought I'd never hear again. One morning, just as the sun broke through, a nurse called me. "Diego wants to see you." I hurried over. Diego was propped up in bed, holding a box of crayons. He spoke, weak but clear. "I drew you." On the paper were 2 people, one big, one small, holding hands under the sundae. Under the drawing, he'd scrawled, "Miss Valentina and me, no one gets left alone." I hugged him tight. The drawing blurred with my tears. Maybe that was the first time my tears felt warm instead of bitter. That day, leaving the hospital, I walked past the Coronado shoreline. The water rippled, the breeze was light, the salty air mixed with jasmine from the yards. I lifted my face to a clear sky, white clouds curling around a far peak, light spilling through like a ribbon. Inside me, an empty space had been filled not by justice or victory, but by a child who carried light. Diego made me understand that sometimes the only way through loss is to give away what love you have left. And in every one of his smiles, I heard Miguel's laugh again, gentle, clear, and never-ending. A month after the first hearing, San Diego's rain had eased. The sea was calmer, the waves lapping the shore like they, too, were settling after days of storms. I sat in a small room overlooking Coronado Bay, early light catching the new wooden sign on the wall. Miguel Foundation, for those left behind. That was how I chose to remember my son, not with a headstone, but with other lives saved from his pain. From what was left after the court's freeze, I built the Miguel Foundation, a way to keep his heart beating in others. In the first week, the foundation covered meds and beds for 12 people. I went with the volunteers to each unit, signing small hospital vouchers with a heavy heart. Every room had the same smell: medicine, rusty metal, and despair. Every face looked the same: tired, quiet, and longing for a hand to hold. One afternoon, as I was reviewing the new patient list, the head nurse called me over. "Mrs. Valentina, there's a new little boy. No family, records say orphan. He's quiet, very polite." I followed her to room 214. The door was ajar, weak light seeping through a pale green curtain. On the bed lay a tiny boy, curled up, head bald, skin so pale it was almost transparent. When I stepped closer, his dark eyes opened wide, bright and unbearably sad. "Hi there," I said softly. "I'm Valentina." He nodded slightly, voice barely a breath. "Ma'am, do I have to stay here all by myself forever?" That question sliced through me. I saw Miguel again in my mind, my son on that hospital bed, alone, with no one there. I sat and took that small hand in mine. "No, sweetheart," I said. "From now on, you will never be alone." The file said his name was Diego Morales, 8 years old, leukemia, parents killed in a car crash last year. He'd been moved from an orphanage when his condition worsened. No visitors. No one paying the bills. I signed the treatment sponsorship to cover all his costs through the foundation. Then I hired a private nurse to care for Diego and ordered the snacks and comic books he liked. Every time I came, he gave me a small smile and said shyly, "Ma'am, I feel better today." I smiled and patted his head. "Good job, little soldier." A week later, Diego started getting used to the long infusions. I went to the hospital every afternoon and read to him. One day, when I reached the part where the boy in the story finds his mother, Diego gently interrupted, "Ma'am, is Miguel somewhere up in the sky too?" I froze, then nodded, my voice tight. "Yes, sweetheart. Miguel is in a very bright place, and I'm sure her son is looking down at you and smiling." He smiled small, but it lit up the whole room. In that moment, I heard Miguel's laughter drift back, warm and close like a breeze. I understood that some things are lost but never truly disappear. They return in another form, gentler, softer. Every time I looked at Diego, I felt I was seeing the kindest part left in this world. He was fragile, but always tried not to complain. When the nurse came to give a shot, he held my hand and whispered, "Ma'am, I'm not scared. I'm strong." I turned away to hide my tears. His words were like a small hand lifting me out of my own abyss. One afternoon, with the last sunlight slanting through the window, Diego lay on his side holding the comic I'd just bought. He looked up and spoke in a voice light as wind. "If I get better, can I help you take care of the others?" I smiled softly and touched his cheek. "You don't have to promise anything, Diego. Just having you here already helps me." From that day on, I didn't go to the hospital carrying grief, I carried comfort. I sat by his bed for hours, coloring with him, telling stories, and sometimes just watching the rain outside the window. Once, he fell asleep on my arm, breathing steady, face so peaceful I forgot about the ventilators, the disinfectant, and the steady beeping of the heart monitor. I took a photo and kept it on my phone. In it, Diego is smiling bright eyes, a gap-toothed grin, just like Miguel at 8 years old. Whenever my screen lights up, I hear that laugh, the laugh I thought I'd never hear again. One morning, just as the sun broke through, a nurse called me. "Diego wants to see you." I hurried in. Diego was propped up, holding a box of crayons. He spoke, weak but clear. "I drew you." On the paper were 2 people, one big, one small, holding hands under the sundae. Under the drawing he'd scrawled, "Miss Valentina and me, no one gets left alone." I hugged him tight. The drawing blurred with my tears. Maybe that was the first time my tears felt warm instead of bitter. That day, as I left the hospital, I walked past the Coronado shore. The water rippled. The breeze was light. The salty air mixed with jasmine from the yard. I looked up at the clear sky, white clouds curling around a far peak, light spilling through like a ribbon. Inside me, an empty place had been filled not by justice or victory, but by a child who carried light. Diego made me understand that sometimes the only way through loss is to give away what love you have left. And in each of his smiles, I heard Miguel's laugh again, gentle, clear, and never-ending. 3 months later, Diego was cleared for discharge. Dr. Patel smiled as he handed me the home care approval. "He's recovering well, Valentina. Now he just needs a warm place to grow." I looked down at Diego, his eyes sparkled like morning waves, cheeks pink again. He squeezed my hand and whispered, "Ma'am, let's go home." I nodded, my throat tight. Those 2 words, "go home," had never meant more. That afternoon I drove Miguel's old pickup, the one I hadn't had the courage to touch before. In the passenger seat, Diego hugged his brown teddy bear, legs swinging, eyes on the window. Sunlight washed over his face, lighting each fine strand of hair. In his gaze, I saw Miguel at 8 sitting just like that beside me on his first trip to the beach. The little house by the water where Miguel had lived sat on a quiet street, bougainvillea spilling over the porch. I once thought I'd never return. It held too much pain. But today, when I opened the door, the darkness wasn't there. Afternoon light poured through the windows, laying across the patched walls as if the house itself was breathing again after being forgotten. "You can choose your room," I said, setting the keys on the wooden table. Diego looked around and pointed to the small room at the end of the hall. "I want this one. It smells like the ocean." It was Miguel's room. I stood still. The old paint peeled. The curtain still creased from the day I left. But Diego's eyes held something that softened me, the eager look of a child who finally had a place to call home. That evening I brought out brushes and a can of ocean blue paint, the color Miguel loved, and started rolling it over the walls. Diego stood beside me, grinning, hands smudged with paint. "I can help, right?" I laughed. "All right, little soldier." We worked until nightfall. When the light clicked on, the room wore a new coat, soft blue, the smell of paint blending with sea salt and jasmine from the porch. I set Miguel's framed photo back on the shelf, the one from his officer graduation, pride shining in his face. Diego stared at it a long time, then gently placed his teddy bear beside it. "Would he like me?" he asked, voice tiny. I smoothed his hair and answered, "He'd be very proud, Diego." "Because you're brave and you know how to love." He smiled, eyes bright in the warm yellow light, the kind that made the house feel truly warm for the first time in years. That night I cooked our first meal in a kitchen that hadn't seen steam in a long time. I chose tacos, Miguel's forever favorite. As a kid, he wanted tacos every Sunday and always told soldier stories between bites. I folded each shell and sat Diego at the table. He took a bite, eyes lighting up. "This is so good, ma'am." I laughed. "From now on, every Sunday is taco day. Deal?" Diego nodded, mouth full, making me laugh until tears came. After dinner, we sat on the front porch. A thin crescent moon hung over the water, waves tapping like a steady heartbeat. Diego leaned on my shoulder and whispered, "I like it here. The waves sound like a lullaby." "Me too," I said, squeezing his hand. "This used to be Miguel's home. Now it's ours." In the days that followed, life slipped into a new rhythm, not loud, not tearful, just small moments that meant everything. Each morning I woke early, brewed coffee and warmed milk for Diego. When the sun crested the ocean, I took the kayak out while he ran along the wet sand, his small feet leaving a long trail of prints. From a distance, I heard his laughter carried on the wind. That sound, innocent, clear, softened my heart. I didn't feel alone anymore. It seemed like with every wave that hit the shore, Miguel sent a little piece back to me. In the late afternoons, Diego and I sat on the porch, coloring the drawings he made at the hospital. One day, he drew me silver hair flying in the wind, a paddle in my hand on the open water. He put the crayon down and whispered, "Ma'am, you look like a superhero." I laughed and smoothed his hair. "No, son, I'm just an old soldier learning how to love life again." At night, the house grew unusually quiet. Warm yellow light slipped through the curtains, falling across his small, sleeping face. I stepped softly into the room, pulled the blanket up for him, and stood there a long time. Diego shifted, opened his eyes, and mumbled, sleepy, "Miss Valentina, can you be my grandma?" The question tightened my chest. I bent down, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "From now on, you have a family, Diego. And I'll be your grandma, if you want." He smiled in his sleep, lashes fluttering, then drifted into a deep rest. I sat beside him, listening to that steady breathing blend with the distant surf. The room glowed with a warm gold, the scent of fresh paint mixing with the ocean smells of a beginning, of new life. I looked around, Miguel's photo on the wall, the teddy bear beside it, the bedside lamp casting a gentle glow. In that space, past and present folded into each other, making a real home. No more sorrow, no more loss, only the breath of two souls who had found each other in a wide world. I understood that some wounds can't be healed by medicine or time. They only close when we open the door and let someone in, someone small enough, pure enough, to remind us there is still something worth loving. That night, when I turned off the light, the moon still shimmered outside the window, laying a silver band across Diego's bed. I whispered, as if speaking to Miguel, "Son, I kept my promise. I came home, and I'm not alone anymore." The far-off waves answered softly, like a gentle good night. In that old house, under a ceiling washed in gold, I felt a true healing born not of justice but of love. A child had stepped into my life like a small lantern, and that light was enough to drive out every shadow I had carried. One late autumn morning, with a salty breeze blowing in from the sea, I received an envelope with no return address. The handwriting was messy, familiar enough to chill me. I opened it. Inside were only a few lines. "Valentina, I know I was wrong, but I have nothing left. I just need a little money to pay off debts and leave this place. Please think of Miguel. I won't bother you again." No real apology. Not a single line about the pain she caused. Just cheap words wrapped in fake pleading, as if money could erase everything. I sat still for a long time, staring at the paper. Outside, the waves kept rolling in, spilling over the sand and slipping back, leaving white foam that vanished quickly. I folded the letter and tucked it into the thick case file. I still kept the evidence that had exposed Valeria's true face. She didn't deserve an answer. That afternoon, Ruiz called. His voice was low but more at ease than usual. "Valentina, the court rejected her appeal. All the evidence still stands. She has no more options. I exhaled softly and looked at Miguel's photo on the wall. Thank you, Ruiz. I don't need her to suffer more punishment. I just need her kept away from anything Miguel left behind. You know, he said, most people come here chasing a win. I think you're chasing peace. I smiled faintly. Justice isn't the sound of a gavel, Ruiz. It's being able to sleep without hating anyone. When the call ended, I stepped onto the porch, sea wind lifting my silver hair. Diego sat in the yard, carefully sticking round labels onto each medicine bag the care packs the Miguel Foundation was sending to patients in remote areas. On each sticker he'd scrawled with a colored pen, "Be brave. All done, ma'am," Diego shouted, cheeks flushed from the sundae. I walked down and looked at the neat row of bags, my heart softening. You did great, Diego. We're going to carry hope much farther. Since the hearing ended, the Miguel Foundation had grown faster than I imagined. Ruiz linked me with medical groups, and Javier helped run the mobile care program, sending medical vans to remote places where patients couldn't reach the city. Diego and I often joined the first runs. We handed out medicines, warm blankets, and simple meals to people fighting illness. Some gripped my hand, trembling, some just bowed quietly in thanks. Each time I felt a bit lighter. One day, at a small mountain hospital, Diego gave me the last sticker. He spoke with surprising seriousness. "This one's for you. You have to be brave too." I laughed, and tears still spilled. I stuck it on the ambulance right next to the Miguel Foundation logo. That tiny yellow circle shone under the sun, a reminder that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward anyway, even after loss. That night, back home, I opened my laptop to write a post for the Foundation's website. I meant to share updates, but my hand started typing something else. I titled it Miguel's Legacy. I didn't write about the trial, about Valeria, or the dark days. I wrote about Miguel, my son, who laughed at the waves, who shared his last taco with his mom, who dreamed of helping others while he lived. I wrote that sometimes kindness can grow out of betrayal if we have the patience not to let hatred consume us. The post ended with a simple line: "Justice isn't only punishment. True justice is helping someone keep living with faith, with a hand to hold, with a smile." I posted it at midnight. The next morning, my inbox overflowed. "Your story made me want to call my mom right now. I thought I could never forgive, but now I see forgiveness is the only way not to carry the weight forever. Miguel is gone, but through you, he's still saving people." I read each message, tears falling while my heart warmed. I didn't feel the same loss anymore. It was as if Miguel still lived, just in another form, through the people the Foundation touched, through the smiles, and through Diego, the child who brought light back into my life. In the afternoon, Diego ran into my office holding a phone. "Ma'am, we have 200 more donors. They said your post made them cry." I patted his head and smiled. "It's okay. Tears are one way people find their hearts again." I looked out the window. The sky was pale gold, the waves curled softly, and sunlight fell across Miguel's photo. It lit the "Be Brave" sticker on the desk, making it sparkle like a tiny star. In that moment, I knew the past had finally stepped back. Valeria might still exist somewhere, a drifting shadow, but she no longer had the power to define my life. I chose another road, not living to seek revenge, but living to give. And every time I see Diego smile, I hear a familiar voice inside me, deep, gentle, like wind from the far horizon. "Mom, I'm proud of you." I lifted my head and smiled. Outside, the blue sea never stopped moving, like life itself, always continuing, no matter how much loss lies behind. That morning in La Paz blazed with Sunday the county. Courthouse opened early. A few reporters outside. Camera shutters clicking. I stepped out of the car with my old leather case of files. On my lapel, I pinned my Marine Corps service medal, not to show off, but to remind myself I've been through worse battles than this. This was the final hearing. to determine all assets and Valeria Cole's civil liability. Nearly a year since Miguel died, the truth was about to settle. Ruiz walked beside me, steady and unhurried. "Today is the last chapter," he said, "and I promise justice won't miss a thing." The courtroom was larger than before, more crowded, yet strangely quiet. Valeria sat at the defense table in a plain black dress, hair messy, face pale with powder. She was no longer the proud woman from the yacht, only a shaky shadow of herself trying to look composed. When the judge called us to order, Ruiz rose, his voice ringing clear in the solemn room. "Your Honor, today we present a money flow chart, proof of the defendant's pattern of misusing and appropriating assets." On the big screen, arrows linked transfers, invoices, and the dates Miguel was hospitalized. Ruiz pointed to each line. April 10th yacht charter Ocean Queen, $48,000. Same day, Miguel Cole is admitted to the ER for internal bleeding. April 15th. Cartier jewelry purchase, $22,000. That day, the patient began to slip into a coma. April 18th cash withdrawal of $70,000 at 3 p.m. At 7 p.m. And the same day, he passed away. Each figure landed like a blade in the silence. I heard murmurs behind me, but inside, only my heartbeat remained slow, steady, unshaken. Ruiz turned. "We call our first witness Mrs. Teresa Montoya, the Coles' neighbor." Teresa walked to the stand, small but steady. Her voice trembled slightly, yet every word was clear. "I lived next door for over 10 years. In those last weeks, Miguel was skin and bone, coughing blood. But Valeria was gone all the time. I knocked once. He cracked the door and said, 'She's busy.' I didn't expect to hear the next day he was gone." The room fell silent. Valeria dropped her head, fingers interlocked, knuckles white. Ruiz thanked Teresa, then signaled the next witness. Dr. Julian Patel stepped up with the chart. He looked straight at the judge, voice calm but heavy. "I confirm the patient was admitted severely anemic and exhausted, but his life could have been extended at least a year with proper treatment and consistent care. No one visited. No one signed consent for a transfusion. He died alone." I bowed my head. The old images returned. The white ICU, the ventilator's hiss, my son's hand growing cold in mine. But I didn't cry. My tears had turned to steel long ago. Ruiz faced the bench, voice low. "Your Honor, we are not here for revenge. We are here to show that neglect can kill, and sometimes it is the cruelest crime." The judge studied the file for a long moment, then struck the gavel 3 times, voice firm and final. "The La Paz court orders. Seizure of all assets belonging to the defendant, Valeria Cole, including real property, bank accounts, and investments. Transfer of estate management and related funds to the Miguel Foundation, administered by Mrs. Valentina Cole. Permanent prohibition against the defendant's access to or interference with said assets." The gavel echoed like a bell closing a chapter. Valeria burst into tears, shouting, voice ragged, "No, you don't understand. I just wanted a better life." She collapsed into the chair, face contorted, makeup streaked. But there was no remorse in her eyes, only the fury of someone who'd lost it all. 2 officers helped her from the room. I didn't watch. I lifted my eyes and met Ruiz's. He gave a small nod, the sign of a victory that didn't need celebration. Outside, the La Paz sun was so bright I squinted. Wind swept dry leaves along the steps. I paused, touching the silver medal on my chest, the metal flashing in the light. I whispered, barely loud enough for myself, "Son, I kept my word. Justice was done, and I'll keep living for you not in hatred, but in the light." I looked up. The sky was a clean, endless blue, and in the sea breeze I thought I heard Miguel's voice, deep, gentle, "Mom, I'm proud of you." I smiled and nodded. Then I turned and walked toward the ocean, where the light never goes out. 6 months after the final hearing, La Paz skies were scrubbed clear. The sea breeze no longer tasted bitter, only sweet, like a new beginning. That morning, Doctor, Patel called, his voice carrying a rare joy. Valentina, Diego is completely in remission. His blood work is clean, no sign of relapse. I sat quietly on the porch, the phone trembling in my hand. My eyes blurred, not from pain, but from knowing that sometimes miracles are real. Diego came running over, hair messy, holding a kite painted with a blue fish. "Grandma, I can go back to school." I hugged him tight, listening to that small, steady heartbeat in his chest. "Yes, son, this is the real miracle." In the days after, Diego and I fixed up the house together. We painted the walls a sandy yellow and planted bright red bougainvillea along the porch, the flower Miguel once called the color of Mom's smile. Diego loved painting, so he drew everywhere: the sun, ocean waves, even a giant whale across the kitchen wall. I couldn't bring myself to paint over it. In every clumsy line were laughter and a childhood being given back to a kid who had fought so much darkness. On the living room wall, I hung 2 frames, one of Miguel, one of Diego. 2 faces, one gone, one growing, both looking toward the sunlit window. Between them, I saw myself. Someone who spent nearly half a life learning that coming home isn't returning to a place, it's finding the freed I love you once forgot. In the mornings, I kept my routine of kayaking. Diego stood on the shore, waving his arms wildly. "Grandma, hurry, a fish is chasing you." I looked back and laughed, water splashing up around the paddle. His laughter mixed with the waves and carried all the way to the horizon. I can't remember the last time I laughed that freely. At night, we fired up the grill on the porch. The smell of charcoal, the sear of meat, the wind hissing through the trees, everything blended into the familiar sound of a real home. On the table, I set Miguel's photo, as if he were still there sharing dinner with us. Diego looked at the picture and whispered, "Grandma, I think he's smiling." I answered softly, smiling in the warm light. "So am I, Diego." We sat a long time, watching the moon rise over the water. I told him about my old patrols at sea, about long nights on watch in big storms, and about how a soldier learns that fear never disappears, you just learn how to live with it. Diego listened, his head on my shoulder, and said quietly, "Grandma, I'll be brave like you." I laughed and smoothed his hair. "You don't have to, son. Just be kind. That's enough." That night, when the house fell quiet, I looked around. Light spilled through the window and washed over the 2 photos side by side. My heart felt strangely peaceful, as if every bitter twist in my life had led me back to this moment. I knew I had finally, truly come home, not just to an old house, but to the part of my heart I'd once lost. My story isn't only about fighting for justice. It's about learning to forgive others and myself. And I know there are many mothers out there like me, betrayed, grieving, yet choosing love over hate. Thank you for staying with me to the very end. I believe if you're hearing this, you probably believe what I do, that justice and kindness can walk together. I'd love to know where you're watching from, what city, what country. Please share in the comments so I can see how far Miguel and Diego's journey has traveled. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share so the light of compassion can reach a little farther. I'm Valentina, and this is how I keep my promise to always come home.